Chapter 11. Self-Chiller. In the early 50s, a young mother watches her 4-year-old boy at a playground in Loviisa. It is the middle of summer. The poplars are shedding gray tufts, and the sun is shining in the sky. But the mother is worried. The other children run around the playhouse. The boys giggle and pull girls by their pigtails. The suspension bridge of the playhouse wobbles as the little ones rush across its planks. Below, on the wooden edge of a large sandbox, girls and boys build a city together. A bright, blonde-haired girl spins a tiny model ship around the tower, and 2 boys dig a tunnel, one on one side of the ridge, the other on the other side. The tunnel meets in the middle, and the boys laugh triumphantly. The girl is bored. She starts crying, and other girls come to ask what's wrong. Only little Ulv sits alone, far away, on the other side of the sandbox. And if someone asks him about the lonely house that Ulv has built on his enormous piece of land, Ulv doesn't answer. He just stares vaguely into the distance and smiles his mysterious, childish smile, like he's somehow too cool for that. Too cool of a guy to tell the rest of the brats about his house. The others soon tire of Ulv's arrogant demeanor and leave him alone. The young mother doesn't understand why her child isn't interested in having company. Even with his parents, Ulv hasn't exchanged more than 10 words. He does talk, but only when he's alone, talking with himself. Sometimes his mother listens to him from another room and doesn't understand what is wrong with her little boy. A distant street parade can be heard. The bass drum thumps. Da-dum, da-dum. Ulv sits in proud solitude in the corner of the sandbox and bobs his curly head back and forth to the rhythm of the music. It looks like he's self-chilling. It's Wednesday afternoon in the forest near Jesper's house. This time, Khan comes first, and the others try to keep up with him. He's heavily caffeinated, and he hasn't slept. All night long he flicked Harnoncour's lights on and off, made coffee and long-distance calls, and listened to sad songs until his mother asked him to turn it down. Khan waves his hands as he speaks. His orange windbreaker unzipped, allowing a striped scarf in Ilmaran turquoise, orange, and violet colors to flutter free. His mother knitted it for him for the winter solstice, and then made a pom-pom beanie, also in Ilmaran colors, for his last birthday. They come as a set. The forest path winds between the hills, tall pine trees on both sides of the road. The 3 of them side by side, Jesper in the right wheel hut, Therese on the left, and Khan right in the middle on the tuft of grass, come down the hill of snow and sand along the road. The grass is frost-patterned, crunching under their boots. Individual snowflakes fly in the air. The dry end-of-autumn scenery sparkles. Khan breathes in the fresh air. The lichen decays. He slaps his mittens together on their string, then flings them over his back.
I've never believed in a criminal solution, you know that. Every step forward is a step forward, and in that sense, of course, it's great to hunt down linoleum salesmen. But Therese, sometimes I feel like you collect these guys like I collect memorabilia, you know? Now, I don't mean it in a bad way, of course.
Therese blows large puffs of silver-gray Astra smoke and makes rings in the middle, which are scattered by the quiet wind.
No offense taken. You're right, too. You collect this stuff because you think you'll find something about the girls. I collect my monsters for the same reason.
And what do you collect, Jesper?
asked Khan.
I don't collect anything, you morbos.
But it's nice when the man has a hobby, I guess. Listen, what's going to happen now?
Well, Trent Murder's possessions must be searched. His relatives must be interviewed.
Therese lists on his leather-gloved fingers.
And what do you mean you saw that he didn't do it?
The forest road bends. Light brown hay, like a person's hair, fills the ruts and rustles under Jesper's feet.
Oh, you're not sure? You can never be sure of the psychedelic cabinet of Captain Pepe Papikarnassos,
interrupts the hyperactive Khan and turns around. Taking a few steps backwards, he explains to Therese.
That's why Zaum is not admissible in court. It's psychedelia. You understand, it doesn't help on its own. Reality has to correspond with it. There have to be witnesses and things. It's all nonsense anyway.
Well, I wouldn't say that it's completely pointless.
Therese throws his cigarette butt under the trees, an orange spark bouncing up where it lands.
But you're right about Pepe Papikarnassos. The subject's fantasies and reality got mixed up in there. It seems to me that it was more like an aspect of him, one that ceased to exist, or if I get time, I should let the local authorities investigate these things.
But now it's, how do you say, basta? Asks Khan.
Right now it's basta, yeah.
Great, because let's be honest, who wants to find them in a ditch somewhere? Really? That's not a goal in itself. That won't amount to anything.
Khan waits for comments with a sly smile and sees Therese raise his hand.
I want to, and it is a goal in itself. Have you ever heard of the concept of closure? There is such a thing as that.
Jesper still looks down on Pepe Papikarnassos' synthesizer whirring, the masturbation of an overrated futurist.
Do you have something better to offer? Tempus Rev? This time we'll do everything by the book?
It wouldn't be bad. Honestly, I wouldn't say no to that either.
Come on, Gunn, be sensible.
The cold air smells of match sulfur as Therese lights his next smoke.
Time is running out. Communication has broken down with Revachol and with the Occident. Half of the world is on high alert. When war comes, all investigations are stopped. Documents, papers, and people can get lost. You have to work quickly, tie up all the loose ends before it's too late.
3 small silhouettes move through the undergrowth at the edge of the fields. They just keep their balance while arguing over the log bridge, where ice drifts downstream under the trees. They jump over fallen trees in the twilight of a forest tunnel and move single file through white meadows. Khan ducks under a barbed wire fence, and Jesper, like Therese, jumps over. The paddocks are left behind. The forest thins out. The sandy furrow of the road sits below the line of tree roots like a tiny canal. A sea breeze rustles in the treetops above, and in the air you can feel how the vastness of the body of water is growing closer.
We've been doing your thing for so long, and nothing has come of it. Give me a chance, too,
Khan explains, more with his hands than his mouth.
Okay, you're right that it's a dead end,
Therese admits.
But then why don't you just say what the plan is and let us think about it? If I think that something can come of it, then okay, let's do it. If not, then we have to take time off.
You don't understand,
Khan says with a shrug.
If you say no, we'll never know. There are no other leads anymore. I can't risk you saying no. Let's take a little trip first, eh? Go and talk to a professional? We should have been in contact with him a long time ago. Now we're a little too rushed.
What do you mean there are no other leads?
Jesper doesn't understand.
What about Marlin's letters? Someone has to send them, and the handwriting was a match. By that age, the handwriting would have developed a bit, and a 15-year-old's handwriting might not match the 13-year-old's 100%. A 95 match is very promising. I've read about it, right, Therese?
Yes, that's right, Khan jumps in. But you know what? I have an idea about how we can fix it. Right now, it's no use to just wait around. We've got to take action, immediately.
What idea?
Well, I put an ad in the newspaper.
Therese ambles along in his 50s-style herringbone coat, looking like a true Koiko, his mouth thoughtfully ajar.
That might not be such a bad idea after all. When did you post this ad?
I submitted it yesterday. It should appear today. I put your number there too, Jesper, in case I'm not at home myself.
And what did you write there?
That if anyone has any information, they should come forward, that nothing bad will happen, to please help out, you know.
This kind of thing can be more effective than you think, Therese explains to Jesper, especially with such old things. You still have to fish for months and months on different columns. Where did you send it?
To Doggins and Capitalist. I had no more money. By the way, you both owe me a fitty. And the consultant I recommended is going to need some too. And we need money for the trip. We'll need at least 1,000. He's very expensive, very highly valued. I've been waiting for it for so long, reading about him.
Jesper is getting impatient. First of all, he certainly doesn't want to go anywhere right now, and secondly, he already knows whose money they're talking about here. Con lives off the settlement from when his father died on a fuel oil rig, and if Therese doesn't start an investigation, he won't be covered for anything.
Listen, lay it out. What kind of consultant are we talking about here?
The three silhouettes reach the rocky bank. The vastness of the sea greets them, across the dried meadow. The grass is white-spotted from the snow, and a single shriveled pine tree sways in the wind. The sky darkens as the men approach the edge of the bank. Jesper pulls his coat collar tighter, the roar of the sea ringing in his ears. He often walks the 6 kilometers to the bank alone. From here you can see what they all long to see. The beach strip of Charlottesville on the other side of the bay, in the snowy distance. Con leans on the log railing and looks down. Gargantuan waves smash against the rock wall, the water curving and the white crest of the wave breaking into a million clumps of foam. The views through the man's glasses blurs from the spray. Jesper appreciates the autumn current. It comes once a year, and now he has a clear plan. Let them go. I tell the girl that I'll go too, then think of something else to tell the boys. He measures the wind.
The self-chiller, says Con. It's high time to talk to him about the girls.
Jesper starts to laugh, but Therese is serious.
Wait. He confirmed the skeletons of Aberdeenase and Dobreva to the nearest kilometer, explains Con. More? 2 years ago, following his trip, they went to Corpus Mundi to look for Cornelius Gerdy. The chain he brought out has now sunk into the Pale, but they found Gerdy's cutlery and the remains of his camp nearby. After 500 years. The self-chiller, Jesper, lives in Lemon Cays, in a country house in the woods, and we're going there.
It's snowing on the tin gray sea. The temperature is at 0. The wind in the Gulf is less than 10 meters per second, and for the next 2 weeks, the storms in western Katla, right at the edge of the Pale, will cause the ocean to swell. A 2-week window, perfect conditions. Jesper can already feel how the mass of water breaks into waves on the Charlottesville beach, 10 kilometers from here. The prows of waves move in his eyes, long and stable like beautiful thoughts.
Okay, says Jesper, but I have a conference of my own. Design stuff, from Thursday to Saturday. And by the way, Lemon Cays is not a very good idea right now. Or maybe you didn't hear?
Little Ulv is 9 years old when modern dance music is born in Oranje. Johan Hauer, Rietveld, and Arno van Eyck spin records in university halls, in Vesper, in Vederunt. The world's first disco, Das Boom, opens on a summer evening in Messina's Arcade Square after the most epic set in human history. The ecstatic crowd crowns Theo van Gogh to be an innocence. Ulf comes home from school wearing a backpack. He is in the 4th grade, and he sits alone on the back row because he doesn't care what the teacher says. Ulf is not interested in mathematics, and natural sciences don't interest Ulf either. Ulf isn't interested in mean girls. Ulf is only interested in one thing in this world. On his way home, he stops with his mouth agape in front of the phono store in Westermalm, where music lovers file in and out. Theo van Gog's Coma remix of one of the old overtures plays, and music lovers watch, with tapes under their arms, as little Ulf dances under the speakers in front of the store as if possessed by an evil spirit. Tears flow down Ulf's cheeks, and the whole world evaporates. Everyone laughs and watches with delight as the little boy squirms and scrambles, spins, bellows, waves, shouts. "Wow, no way!" He punches the air with his hands and feet, slams his palms against the hood of a motor carriage, and they simply cannot understand. How is he so hardcore? It can't be that hardcore. A clerk in a trendy sweatshirt comes out of the store, from out of the gray chaos of lost things, where a coma echoes over human history. A young man steps in front of Ulf and hands him a Stereo 8 tape. Theo van Gogh, it says on the cover, Comte de Perus Maîtresse. This is the first and last time in Ulf's life that a living person has been worth something to him. The motor carriage's chrome tire spins and snow crunches under the wheel chains, but Inayat Khan is not there. He is 13 years old, and he steps down from the porch of Therese's father's cottage into the apple orchard. It's dark, and grasshoppers are chirping. The self-chiller puts the Stereo 8 tape into the player, 2 plastic discs spinning. A sound check is in progress, but that June night is quiet. The music is not audible way out there. It's 20 years in the future, and a long, long way from Inayat Khan. The air is filled to the brim with scents. It meets the boy like a spirit from under the trees, circling around his knees and smelling of early ripening soysleps. Khan walks barefoot on the dew-soaked grass. The other boys are sleeping inside, on the 2nd floor, but he couldn't sleep. At 8:30 in the morning, they had gone to work together. Khan's body is exhausted from the construction work, but his heart is restless. The money isn't there to make ends meet either. The dealer, Ziggy, quoted astronomical sums on the other end of the phone. 300 real. Jesper took his Man from Heimdall collection of adventure novels to the antique store after a lot of persuasion. Khan sold his binoculars. 16-stroke combustion chambers beat in the heart of the machine. Far away in Lemon Cays, the windows of a country house vibrate to a bass rhythm. Check, check. But Inayat Khan is not there. A soysleps drops onto the grass at his feet. Little Inayat polishes the apple clean on his shirt sleeve and takes a seat on the garden bench. He crunches into the fruit and feels a sweet pain stabbing in his heart, making it hard to breathe. It's the feeling of a possibility slipping out of your hand, which grows throughout the day and then makes itself felt in the evening. Talk about something. You always have such awesome presentations in history and science class. Dark green eyes, extremely kind and so very interested. Are you sure, Khan? Try to be reasonable now. There's no point in humiliating yourself like that for nothing. There is steam under the hood. The engine belt is running. The tape slides against the magnetic reader. But it's still quiet in the apple orchard. Inayat Khan doesn't believe in God, not especially. God was apparently invented by some man named Pius in Ilmara sometime, certainly more than 3,000 years ago. Maybe. But now Khan throws the apple core into the bushes, brings his hands together, and prays.
Please make Malin like me back. God, please make it so that she really likes me, not just, well, 'cause you're God. I promise that then I will no longer think that some guy, Pius of Pericarnassus, invented you. I promise that I will believe then that you have existed from the beginning of time and drawn heaven and earth with your, golden compass, or whatever it was. I'm sorry, God, that I'm ragging on you like this, but look, it's really hard for me to believe that you exist when Malin Lund doesn't like me.
Khan looks up at the sky. It's spinning in the darkness of his heart. The expanse lighting up star by star. Love, like a sleek furred cat curling into a ball inside his belly. Love, for him, is the fear of loss. The red glow of the taillights turns the snow blood-colored. Fumes rattle out of the muffler of the motor carriage. The chain tires swish on the snow, and the engine rumbles for a moment. Gear shift, tone rising. The acceleration pushes the reckless driver against the back seat. In the driver's cabin, the young man's fingers are frozen to the steering levers, and his racing glasses are on. An unlit mountain road is reflected in the frosty surface of the glass as it disappears under the wheels. The atmosphere roils above the lemon case zone of entropinetic catastrophe. The snow-speckled peaks of dark mountain ranges cut into the horizon, gritted teeth like those of a linoleum salesman. At the bottom of the valley, among the clearings and spruce forests, a black motor carriage is speeding along a winding road at 150 kilometers per hour.
This is fucking awesome,
exclaims Khan. Therese nods. Fuel oil exhaust fills the cool air of the cabin until it's like industrial acid. The agent looks out of the window. The fence posts lining the road are flying by in the falling snow, and the white masses of forest are visible from the valley below, checkered with dark logging squares. Khan jumps out of the seat next to Therese, and into the seat opposite Therese. He lets the last drop from the wine bottle fall onto his tongue. A curve knocks him against the wall of the cabin with a crash.
Done.
He shows Therese the empty bottle. Immediately, a new flavored berry wine appears in Khan's hand. The screw cap flies off with a crinkle. Sugar, 25%, crunches between his teeth. Far away, on the other side of the valley, on the opposite slope, lights flash in the dark. All the other machines have been moving in the opposite direction since Wednesday night, away from the entropinetic catastrophe. That was when Khan, Agent Maciejek, and the mad Suruese rally driver Kenni, just Kenni, had set off together from Vasa.
What's your name?
Kenni.
Kenni who?
Just Kenni. Look, the zone of entropinetic collapse. It can't be. Even the spruces are starting to lift into the sky. Fucking hell. Just like they said, this truly is a must-see, and the houses too.
Kenni barks from the driver's seat over the engine noise.
How's it going?
Shouts Khan in response. He, unlike Therese, is still a little worried when the machine shakes. And in the darkness of the driver's seat, in the yellow glow of the speedometer, he sees a pointer move to 170.
It's going great. It's totally great. I'm not worried at all. And the road? How is the road? Say what? The road? No, it's all good. I'm not worried at all.
Kenni isn't worried at all. Kenni wants some flavored berry wine instead, and when Khan thinks Kenni shouldn't drive drunk, Kenni says,
Don't worry, all right? I've been drinking half the trip already, otherwise I'd fall asleep. It helps me focus, you see?
The road continues along the hillside, between the spruce trees. Kenni drifts on the curves in order to stay on the road. Con feels safer only when the motor carriage plunges down the slope and deep into the forest along the village road. Snow crunches under the tire chains and the engine screeches. The square window panes have been totally covered in snow, with only circles of visibility left. A ghostly black forest wall flutters beyond the portholes. Suddenly, Kenni pulls to the left side of the road, and Con jumps back to his side. They whiz past a red Grad Telecom van. The news agency camera crew waves at Con from their own snow-frosted window. Con waves back. He's been drinking in the cabin with Therese for the last 2 days. Kenni refuses to stop. He wants to break a record. He has a stopwatch on his hand. And the whole time, they watch all the rest of the traffic go the other direction. Even 200 kilometers out from Vasa, the traffic jam was still crawling along the opposite lane. People from the outskirts on their way to cities to visit relatives. From the hiss of the car radio, they learned that a similar panic was taking place everywhere in Katla. In Arda, Norrköping is the place where everyone flocks just in case, for its floating train stations. Tickets for the next 2 months are also sold out in Jelenka, near the collapsed Northern Passage. You can't escape. A last resort might be to leave by foot over the Boreal Plateau. The wide open landscape out the side window gradually became rounded, hazy whalebacks gliding on the horizon, with spruce forests riding the humps. The motorway also changed into a highway late in the night, but the traffic in the opposite direction didn't thin out. The road just came down from its pillars into the middle of the fields, where land was a gleaming white from the thickly fallen snow. Con fell asleep with his head against the side window. In the darkness before them shone a diamond sea of headlights on one side of the road, and the bare, empty pavement of the other. A single pair of red taillights slid hurriedly toward Lemon Cays. Only military convoys and the machines of foreign news agencies with radio antenna units on their roofs went alongside them. In the morning, Con opened his eyes to a deserted Suruese village passing by outside the glass. Waves of electric wires meandered between the poles, and below them, on an empty village street, a young girl in a long skirt and jacket was riding a bicycle. She looked Con straight in the eyes, reflectors shining on the spokes of her bike. They were 1,500 kilometers from the border of Vasa, and 1,500 more were still ahead. Kenni drove quietly. In the cabin, they could hear the ice breaking in the mud puddles under the wheels. The girl waved and turned onto a side road at the outer border of the settlement. The darkness of the forest gate engulfed her, the rear light of her bicycle flashing to the rhythm of its dynamo. It was already snowing in the tree tunnel ahead, so they went, Inayat Khan, Therese Maciek, and the meanest guy in the taxi fleet, Kenni, just Kenni. For a few hours, the boy sat quietly and watched Suruese land pass by in the haze of twilight. The cold stars of streetlights lit up in the distance. Eternite crumbled from the roofs of the houses. The closer the night got, the thicker the snow became, as the dark, saw-toothed mountains appeared on the horizon, and the villages became less and less frequent. Therese suggested popping open a flavored berry wine.
Otherwise it gets depressing.
Above the darkening mountains ahead, they often saw military airships. Once, an iron barge whizzed straight across the bridge and caught them in its floodlights, its downdraft threatening to upend their motor carriage. But then the ship was gone. Only her lights were still visible, gliding through the darkness above the forest. This is what's called an evacuation. The checkpoint stood abandoned by the road, along with glowing letters reading Lemon Cays. A military barricade made of concrete blocks ran across the road. Kenni put snow chains on his wheels and turned over half a field in the process of driving around the fence. The border point disappeared behind them, along with the invisible boundary of winter's orbit, beyond which is eternal winter. The asphalt also disappeared over time. They encountered rural families on sleds along snowy gravel roads. It is their great privilege to have seen the Pale with their own eyes, where it has towered between the silos since childhood. A passing family, propped up on all their belongings on a horse-drawn sleigh, waved at the funny fat man with dark yellow skin and diamaterialist glasses.
"How strange! They wave every time," says Con, as the Grad Telecom van falls behind them in a cloud of snow kicked up from under the wheels of Kenny's machine. Far away in the dark forest, neither headlights nor sled lights blink any longer. Only those who want to stay here are left now, in the farmyards, the fronts of the combine factories, and the closed village shops. The Pale rises in the dark. "Do you hear that?" asked Kenny from the driver's seat. "The Pale. That's definitely the Pale now. I'm a bit worried."
Therese and Con listen. Indeed, a new sound is growing under the storm. An ominous rumble, a low crackling noise. Like a wave breaking, slowly, slowly. To Con, it sounds like the beginning of a song. He heard it in a dream.
"I'm not with the ICP anymore. They let me go,"
Therese shouts, drunk, hands raised to his mouth and shaped to amplify his voice.
"What?"
Con can't hear at first. The noise is mesmerizing. He feels the hairs on his body stand up, and chills run through him, as if he had just taken off his sweater in a cold room.
"They let me go from the collaboration police."
"I know,"
Con exclaims, handing Therese the flavored berry wine.
"You've been showing some Somerset Ulrich guy's badge the whole way."
"How do you know?"
From Therese's mouth, the smell of alcohol wafts into the cold cabin.
"Because all the border checkpoints called you Mr. Ulrich and Agent Ulrich and Somerset Ulrich."
"That's a missing agent whose papers I took. I've got more of them."
Therese takes a sip. His lips are red, and a sticky liquid spills from the neck of the bottle onto his shirt collar.
"The papers, I mean. And the missing agents. I went by Maciejek in Kronstadt. Otherwise they wouldn't pick up the trail. Thought I'd go to Lemon Case with Somerset Ulrich and abandon the trail. Let them follow me."
"You're wanted, aren't you?"
Yes, haven't I told you? A guy had a heart attack from that little thing."
"From Za or—"
"Exactly,"
says Therese, and in front of him, the Suruese rally ace, Kenny, sees the black mass of the forest slowly drifting into the sky. The earth crunches and cracks as the spruce trees tear themselves out of it, roots and all. The wood screams, and the frozen earth too, like they're in a dentist's chair. A cloud of limestone gravel flies into the air, and far above in the dark, the first trees are subsumed in the Pale. 2 years ago, Con hears the phone ringing throughout his dream. A cold and strange noise, a false awakening. He opens his eyes in his mother's basement and gets up, clad in his pajama pants and slippers. He feels that something is different, but he still goes. The basement around him is rendered strange by the dream. Things are in the wrong places. Nadia Harnoncourt smiles eerily in her locket, and Gonsu has a peach of immortality in his hand instead of a compass. It's molding. An empty glass display case shines on the table in the middle of the room. Con doesn't dare look in there. There's something in its emptiness that he can't remember. Something wrong. There's something wrong with the phone ringing, too, how it sounds through the darkness of the apartment from the upstairs hallway. He goes up the stairs. The hallway sleeps around him. The phone rings on the wall. He reaches out, afraid. His hand sweats on the plastic of the receiver, and feels something forbidding him from answering. But he has to. It's important. Every thread is. So he picks up the receiver, and the hallway fills with the hiss of the pail. It grates in his ear.
"Hello?"
asks Con, but no one answers.
"Hello? Who is it? Please tell me who you are,"
he repeats, more and more pleading each time. The hissing becomes louder and louder, until finally it deafens him. The pressure in his inner ear goes awry, and only that vibration from who knows where remains. Its center. The silence goes through his flesh and bones like waves. It's cold.
"Please."
Plump tears flow from under Con's glasses.
"Tell me who you are."
You know who I am. The vibration emits a child's voice. It says terrible things to Con with it. Con begins to shake. He slumps in the corner of the hall, receiver in hand.
"It's not you! It's not you!"
he cries. His real body shakes along with his mind. He wakes up crying in his bed. His ear throbs. The dream continues while he's awake, only that there is an airship model in the display case again. Nadia no longer smiles, and Gonzu is holding a compass. Sitting on the display case are dried cheese sandwiches from his mother and tepid coffee, and an envelope, a morning shipment from Grad by magnetic post. Saryan Ambutsumyan is written in the sender's area, and inside is a single key, golden and immeasurably complicated. He has 2 years. Chapter 12. Ziggy. 19 years ago, in late autumn. It's 8:15 a.m., and Con is late for school. He hurries along in the city center of Königsmalm. White streaks of traffic glow in the morning darkness, and thick sleet falls. With a backpack on his back, the boy runs across a crosswalk. There's a honk, and a motor carriage whizzes by. He almost got run over. The slushy snowflakes aim for his eyes and melt on his cheeks and woolen hat. Con is running up the stairs to the main door when something pins him in place. The financial manager and the cleaning lady are scrubbing at a big red letter O on the corner of the school's facade. The letter is as tall as the cleaning lady. A policeman shakes his head and looks up at the wall, where a huge slogan decrees, "The whole world is a zone of imminent entropinetic catastrophe." That is the kind of boy Ziggy is. Ziggy is the baddest boy in school. Ziggy is so bad that some would even say that Ziggy is too bad a boy. He's in year 10, but you know what? He came here from another school, and Sixton knows someone at that school. And that person said that Ziggy came to their school from another school as well. Guess which year Ziggy was in there? Exactly, the 10th. I swear it. And you know what else? The school he was at before that, he was in the 10th year there, too. Ziggy's mother is a radiant Vossen woman who works in the Ministry of Education and gets along well with the matriarch of the Lund family. That's why the boy can go to the school in the city center, even though he's had to repeat a year twice. At home, he has checkered notebooks filled with all kinds of siege machines, city walls, and trajectories. But Ziggy doesn't want you to know about him. Ziggy's father is a nihilist, a koiko, and a drunkard. Ziggy is very proud of this. My father? I don't know. A nihilist, a koiko, a drunkard. Ziggy's real name is Sigismund Berg. Therese saw him once in the boys' bathroom, raised his left hand into a fist, and said, "František the Brave." Ziggy said nothing. Ziggy was taking a piss. Psst, psst. Then Ziggy went to the door and stood there for a moment. The zippers on his leather jacket jingled.
Hey, listen, man. What? Stick that Franticheck the Brave up your ass.
Ziggy is a nihilist, and a communist, too, if necessary. The word bourgeois hangs from his lips like a butterfly knife. Bourgeois, the bourgeoisie, typical bourgeois, bourgeois art, petty bourgeois opinion. You are bourgeois, your bourgeois parents. Your parents are bourgeois. It is because your parents are bourgeois. It is because you are bourgeois, Anne. Ziggy also calls his teachers by their first names. Whore of the bourgeoisie, puppy of the bourgeois. Pederasty is a bourgeois disease. Pederasts are bourgeois. Ziggy is a well-read boy, and is also familiar with all the other beautiful names of the bourgeoisie. Pursuit, bourgeois, petit bourgeois, bougie, burger, culotte, middle class, rentier, big landlord. His influence is enormous. A girl with pigtails from the 4th grade comes home and asks, "Dad, why is social democracy so weak?"
Where did you hear such a thing?
Ziggy said that social democracy is weak and communism is powerful. Why don't we have communism, Dad? But above all, Ziggy is still a nihilist. He reads Diamat, dialectical materialism, says that animals are automatons, is a fan of behaviorism, and adores the pale and the nihilistic innocence of Mesque, Ambrosius Saint Miro.
If you had a bit of courage, even an ounce of it, you would also follow Saint Miro.
Ziggy talks about his homeland in the midst of a coup d'etat. It is no longer part of Ziggy. Ziggy has no homeland. The geography teacher sent him to the principal's office, and Ziggy stopped at the door, the zippers of his leather jacket jingling.
"See you in the Pale,"
he said, and ran his index finger across his throat. Back when entreprenetics was not discussed at school, many people gathered around Ziggy during recess, and the corridor echoed with his half-truths.
"The Pale is made of the past," he said. "All the lost things are jumbled up there, sad and abandoned. The Pale is the world's memory of the world. It accumulates matter and sweeps away everything in its path. This is what's called entreprenetic collapse."
"But when will it happen, Ziggy?"
"Yes, Ziggy, when?" "It will happen in your lifetime, little Ola. At least, I hope so. History swallows the present. The old world of matter disappears. Desaparecido. That's why there's no point in our generation going to school. There will be no future. When you grow up, don't have children like your underdeveloped bourgeois parents did. You'll get to see them die, and that's it. Compared to the Pale, there's only a small amount of the world left. In the end, the Isolas will sink, dozens and hundreds of square kilometers of landmass. Can you even imagine? Like a ship keeling over into the Pale. Foom.
Ziggy makes a sinking ship gesture with his hands, the zippers of his leather jacket jingling. The children gasp.
"Don't worry, Ola. This will be the peak of humanity."
Ziggy smokes. In the school bathroom, in the wardrobe corner. Ziggy has a Sprechgesang band, and the manager made a big mistake when he let Ziggy perform on the winter solstice. Ziggy's Sprechgesang is like a machine gun, 400 rounds per minute.
Hook. "Have a smoke in the school bathroom, in the wardrobe corner. Abracadabra in the lobby, in the cafeteria queue."
First verse.
"Nasty morning. It's dark. I'm tired. Nasty slush. Mood 0. Down by the corner of the house. Mama don't see. I light a fat ciggy. Don't you get it? Make me feel good. Chubby cig. I'm warm inside. Everything disappears."
Hook.
"Abracadabra in the school bathroom, in the wardrobe corner. Abracadabra. Vanish like the world."
And so on. In January, Ziggy was expelled from school. And mind you, it wasn't because of his confusing rhymes. In the tolerant educational space of Vasa in the 50s, such Sprechgesang was seen as rather a natural part of the development process. The issue was that Ziggy was a drug dealer. That's why he came to that school in the first place. At that time, no one could have expected such a thing, and Ziggy was more than aware of it. He acted fearlessly, talked openly and loudly about transactions during lessons, distributed samples, and reaped the benefits of Vasa's naivete like Vidkun Herd or the linoleum salesman. He also partook himself. He came to class high. He was an anachronism, 20 years ahead of his time. Sigismund Berg was a dark, spewing stain. When the police finally tracked him down, Ziggy emigrated to his father in Grad and dropped off the radar. A few years later, his charred body was found in an incinerator on the heating floor of a particularly depressing block of flats. Chapter 13. Matrimony. Little Jesper de la Gardie frowns under the sun, a lock of blonde hair hanging annoyingly in the corner of his eye. He is standing at the transportation hub of his own sense of time. Everything leads here, and everything starts from here. He's wearing a white sailor suit for this occasion, and he holds a sailor hat with a dark blue brim in his hand, squeezing it nervously. Jesper is 13 years old. He has a bottle opener in his trouser pocket, a handkerchief with his name on it, 24 speed pills, and a bouquet of lilies sitting on the bench next to him. All preceding time flows to this point, at the Charlottesville tram stop. And it is from this stop that everything to come emanates. It's the 1st of July in the year 52, and in the waiting area under the Funk Pavilion's dashing white arch, Jesper stands on the edge of a summer evening. He's scared. This amusement park attraction has been screeching in his ears since last Sunday, as he's been slowly carried up its lift hill. It's been like this the entire week. The height and the feeling of vertigo are waiting ahead of him. And the fall. He is so indescribably excited. The first tram comes, and the girls aren't there. Jesper feels a strange sense of relief, like when he proved to be too short for the Steel Mountains 3 years ago at the Revachol amusement park. The danger is almost over. But when the next tram also pours passengers into the stop, the girls aren't among them either. The feeling turns upside down in his stomach, into disappointment. What if they don't come? It's 9:30, and they were supposed to be here an hour ago. You have to be at least this tall to ride Steel Mountains, little boy. Jesper gets up on tiptoe and takes a sip of beer to reassure himself. Beer is a terrible idea. He knows it. Beer makes you smell like hops.
It's a terrible idea, Therese. Beer stinks. Chicks hate beer.
But after a week of construction work, a sum of 300 real to Ziggy, the baddest boy in school, to redeem the mysterious pills, after record player batteries, flowers, and God knows what else, Therese had been right. He'd said, "We're out of options, Jesper, and dry. We won't go sober." So they stood in front of the beer stand, as their helpful vagrant licked his lips and dreamed of taking a sip of his bribe. The vendor had looked down at the 3 naughty boys, and the boys had watched as the frothy liquid flowed from the cistern into the cardboard cups. "Like piss," commented Jesper. Kahn took the pint between his brown hands and watched as Jesper drummed his fingers against the brim of his sailor's hat. "Shut up and drink. Look at your shaky hands." You've drunk piss, if I'm not mistaken?" Jesper declared cheekily and sniffed his cup. "We thought about maintaining a facade of virginity, but here you both are smelling as classy as piss." Con, with his low tolerance for jokes, had giggled and sucked some beer down the wrong pipe. Now Con is nervously pacing in front of the bus stop, kicking small pebbles across the road. Every now and then, a beachgoer gets hit on the foot with a pebble and shoots him an angry look. Con apologizes and waves his shirt, with its still drying beer stain, in the sea breeze.
Does it smell? Jesper, tell me, is it noticeable?
Yes, it stinks. It stinks really bad, and you can see the stain. Go check what time the next tram comes.
It's 9, 20 minutes ago.
Don't tell me. Go check.
Once Jesper has gotten rid of Con, he empties his cup. The cardboard flies towards the trash can and barely misses the edge.
Damn it.
Therese, freckled like a devil from the sun on the construction site, bounces on his knees and does a little jig in his ankle-laced Kirza boots. He has a portable record player hanging from leather straps on his back. Cream-colored plastic relief letters announce mono with modern audacity. The machine is enormous and weighs more than a load of bricks. In his hand, Therese tosses heavy batteries up and down.
Well, how is it? You buzzed?
He asked Jesper.
I'm buzzed.
Jesper is buzzed, but not as much.
It's good that way. The idea is to get some confidence, not get knocked down. It's just to take the edge off.
Therese tries to sound smart. He's probably the only one who isn't derailed by the hour-long delay. The potato-haired ragged Koikos, who were buzzed throughout a genocide, the Yugograd massacre. As long as we have a smelly hop drink or flavored berry wine on hand, we are not afraid of anything. Con takes his bunch of chrysanthemums from the bench, and now the three of them are sitting in a row, tapping their feet on the asphalt and patting their knees. Uncoordinated, unrhythmically. A sound of screeching rails comes from beyond the slope, and Therese's grip on his bouquet of 7 roses tightens in fear. The clickety-clack of the hooves is approaching. The horses are already on the slope, and the silver insignia can be seen flashing on the driver's hat. Their buzz has vanished like a fart in the wind. Therese nervously picks at the silver paper of his flower bouquet. He wasn't playing around. 7 red roses, a full complement. He would have bought an assortment of sweets, too, a posh one, in a box with gorgeous gold embossing, like in a Gradian novel, if only his pockets were lined with real. Something flashes from the tram cabin, and out of the corner of his eye, Therese sees Jesper stand up. Let Jesper be proud of his lilies. Let Con play around with chrysanthemums. Roses, red, 7 of them. Now that's chic. Róża I bombonierka, bardzo wykwintnie, Therese Maciejek. The doors of the carriage fold open on the steel frame, and the boy doesn't even notice how the thorns are pricking his cramped hands. The anticipation is remembered in detail, but the incident itself is too brutal. The central moment remains hidden in time behind a veil of suspense. Something that sort of was, something he had done. The girls, 3 of them, stepped from the carriage onto the asphalt, knee socks on their long legs. My God, what cruelty! They've glammed up. Skirt edges flutter, casually chic, as if nothing big is happening. Charlotte, cool as she is, puts her hand on her hip and stands in front of him. But Therese, unable to play along, makes the mistake of embracing her. Arms around her, a gorgeous bouquet of roses hanging against the back of her dress, and, oh yes, the flowers are covered with gold dust. How vikvintia can you get? He notices a foreign scent on the girl's neck. They look at each other then, Therese and the goddess from the 9th grade. And Therese, his face brown and red, a goofy smile up to his ears.
Hello.
Well, hello to you too, replies Charlotte with boyish charm, like it's nothing. She accepts the flowers, and together they go under the pines, where the evening sun doesn't reach. It is dark and quiet, and no one knows what to say. Outside, in the yard of the self-chiller's country house, Kenni maneuvers the motor carriage into a ready-to-go position. The heavy gas rattling of the machine merges with the noise of the forest mass in the distance, on the edge of the pale. You could even feel the sweeping pale from the big house, behind its stone-lined walls. The machine's lights cut in from the yard through the old manor's house's dusty window, illuminating the hall and its cracked stone floor. A smiley face lights up on the window, drawn with a finger in the dust. No one came to the door when they knocked, and the padlock was invitingly open, with flashlights hanging from nails in the hallway. So Therese Maciek, a former ICP agent, and Inayat Khan, a basement-dwelling deseparatist, now walk through a maze of dark rooms with flashlights in hand. Rows of garden tools, a disassembled wheelbarrow, and piles of old furniture pass by in the flashlight beams. Khan fumbles between stacks of roof tiles, and the taller Therese in front of him has to practically crouch under the low ceiling. Another unoccupied broom closet. Looking into the next door, they can see a spacious kitchen with a black-as-coal vaulted ceiling, smelling of chalk and mold. Racks of bottles flash from within, along with what looks like half a stick of smoked sausage. Every now and then, Khan calls out for the master of the house, to no avail.
"Are you sure we're at the right place?"
Khan is sure. Therese feels as if he hears sleigh bells ringing in the distant, muffled chaos of the disaster. The ringing comes closer, phasing in and out like a dream. But it's not coming from outside, where tree roots rattle in the ground and electric wires crackle into the sky. It's coming from somewhere inside the house without electricity. Therese sits on a pile of waste paper and observes the dusty room around him with the flashlight. He's still a little tipsy from all that berry wine, but the darkness is sobering. Doors surrounded by all sorts of junk lead out in all four cardinal directions. He also thinks he hears the low sputtering of an electric generator in the background, in the heart of the house, and points himself towards it. Rattling a jammed door, he steps through it into a large, low-ceilinged hall. Therese turns the flashlight off and carefully steps over the springy floorboards. It's cool inside. The smell of gasoline cuts through the mold. Black snakes' nests of tangled wire meander out from under his shoes towards the dim back corner of the hall. There, green and yellow lights are flashing rhythmically. The hall is barely lit by candles. They flicker on wagon wheel hubs suspended from the ceiling, casting yellowish circles of light on the floor while the windows are sunk into darkness. Therese stands on a circle of light and feels how the sound waves of the sleigh bells prowl around him, icy and alien. Equipment towers high above them, stacked in decks that lean against the plastered walls. Khan stops next to the door and runs his fingers over embossed lettering, reading, "Mono."
"Therese," he whispers, "mono. Look, this one here says Hertz."
The high-frequency notches just barely tremble under his fingers.
"It's
"A disco,"
Therese finishes with a nod.
"This is a discotheque."
3/4 of a century ago, a dark night comes to the Azan Islands. Everything is gray, dark gray. Under the overcast sky, black waves break onto the sandy beach. Palm sabers swing over the heads of the revolutionary lovers. The coups have been thwarted. Everything has come to nothing. Dobreva opens her anarchist eyes, lined with dark makeup. A bit of dried poison bubbles in the corner of her mouth. Ampoule fragments crunch beneath Abidonais's teeth. He strokes the woman's head.
"Listen," he says.
The mesmerizing rhythm of the bells rings over the water in the pitch black. Color has slowly started to seep into the black and white world.
"A dance!"
Dobreva shouts, like a young girl. She gets up and goes. Abedonais follows her into the waves, the black water crashing around his ankles.
"Do you hear that?" Therese asks Khan. "Like some kind of ringing, right?"
"Exactly." Therese lifts a wagon wheel hub bearing a candle from the end of a nail and points it into the dim recesses of the room. The two of them move reverently across the floorboards to the back of the hall. Bit by bit, rows of sliders on a mixing console appear from the dark. Monolithic speakers rise to the ceiling on both sides of the console, and behind it sits a young man in a trendy sweatshirt and headphones. The connecting bridge of the headphones presses his curly hair against his head. Ulv jerks his chin to the rhythm of the sounds, but his eyelids are squeezed shut, as if under high tension.
"Mr. Ulv,"
Khan whispers quietly.
"Sorry, but shh."
The young man puts a finger to his mouth. With his eyes still closed, he furrows his eyebrows so intensely that it seems as if an explosion is bubbling behind his eyelids.
"Please do not ruin my intro,"
he enunciates. Like a huge river, a superhuman cubic meter of partying is rushing up against the dam of the self-chiller's teeth. He points his finger at the mixing console, where dozens and dozens of sliders move up with excruciating slowness.
"This is the most important part."
Khan carefully places his envelope on top of the studio monitor, indicated by the self-chiller's trembling hand. Therese steps backwards like he's in an explosives warehouse. Even so, he manages to read the girls' names from the envelope. And, still a trained agent, he doesn't fail to notice that there are actually two envelopes. There's another one hidden under the girls. Therese can't see what's written on it. He keeps his mouth shut as he and Khan tiptoe through the house, and the ringing of the bells around them grows even louder than the interplanetic catastrophe outside, and it seems to him that the two are somehow in the process of harmonizing. Khan and Therese make their way through the minefields of the junk-filled rooms. The sound rises behind them like a shock wave, a gunshot in slow motion, where everything is back as it was 80 years ago. Krasmazov rises from behind his cabinet in the black and white of history. Gunpowder smoke rises from his mouth, and outside, in the garden of the Parliament building, a sea of counter-revolutionaries roars. But Krasmazov no longer hears the treacherous voice of this world. The intro rings in the cabinet mirrors.
"Well, what happened at the design conference? Are Aklund talked about how he would have nothing against the war. Do you remember Are? I once made the mistake of letting him sit on the couch next to me for a design magazine cover. Now everyone thinks he did something there, too. Are included. In his opinion, war today is more like a happening, a media experiment. And no, I can't rule it out. It could easily have happened. He could have used the word paradigm shift."
Jesper paces circles in one of the Havsun Glar's top-floor hotel rooms and practices to himself.
"After he left the office, he went totally cuckoo. Writes music records for Daggins. By the way, he's gone deaf from nose candy. Really, it can happen. He's had a collapsed nasal septum twice. You should see it. He looks just terrible, like a pig. How does he still like record reviews when he's deaf? No, see, he doesn't actually write the reviews. He just summarizes foreign ones. He deducts 1 star for rock and for disco.
Like you, Khan, would say, he adds 2 stars on top.
Jesper stands in front of the bed and nods approvingly at the cube-shaped beige table.
What happened in Lemon Caves, you ask? Just like that. We went with the boys, real stuff. Nothing bad about it. I really liked it. Snow, spruce trees, at the end of the world. What, dear? Why did we even go there? Well, a specialist lives there, see? Ulf is his name, and he knows how to throw a party by himself. Only a few are born this way. Most people tend to throw parties with other people, otherwise they can't have any fun. But not Ulf. Ulf is a self-chiller, or so they say. Everything falls, you get a little drink, put on a record, dance, talk to yourself. Kind of like I do now, only harder. And then, in the morning, when normal people go to work, you're still self-chilling.
Jesper pulls the frilled curtains of the balcony window open, and outside the sky is dim and cloudy. The balcony seems damp from rain.
Say what? Ah, yes. Well, you know, as always. He talks with the dead. That's right, talks with the dead. They'll come if he plays some Van Eyck or Oud Rietveld. That's why he's alone like that. No, dear, apparently he doesn't tolerate fucking guff.
The door handle clicks, and Jesper steps onto the reed floor of the balcony.
He communicates with the pale. Well, whatever that means. You can understand how it will fascinate us. That thought. Yes, because of those girls. That's right. Ha ha ha.
This is where Dietrich Trentmöller watched them that day. Weird. He can't say he's creeped out here. It's a perfectly normal hotel room. A few less nautical paintings wouldn't hurt. The cattails in the hall are gross. Then the wallpaper is... Well, the wallpaper is still wallpaper. Otherwise, everything is peak 50s elegance. Jesper looks down from the balcony. Charlotte's Yall's sand is damp in the rain, and autumn waves break on the beach. The balcony is high in the sky, on the 12th floor. Jesper stands there alone. He spreads his arms.
Don't be naive. Of course not really. But the show was good. The show was the most important thing in that particular field. Quackery, that is. Think of them as entertainers. Well then, where are we going for dinner? No, I really don't want to talk about it anymore.
Before going out, Jesper stands in the middle of Havsanglar room number 1212. The cover on the sofa is moss green, and the frilled curtains seem apricot cream-colored in the soft light of the floor lamp. No, he doesn't mind. Outside, the world is uniformly gray, and the feminine chic of the room dozes smack in the middle of it. A real petty bourgeois dream. Jesper spreads his arms as if waiting for something to happen. He also takes a few defiant steps before stopping, defeated, with his hands on his hips. The dial of the radio on the cube-shaped bedside table. The clock is ticking. The curtains in front of the open balcony door billow like a sail.
Please,
Jesper says, and looks at the room, its clean walls and high ceiling. But nothing happens. Before the interior designer goes down to the beach, he says to the room in frustration,
"Motherfucker."
Jesper walks along the wet sand with a stubbornly determined step. The rushes rustle in the late autumn cold. The boys' cliff, now much smaller, looks bluish in the distance, through a mist of water droplets. A slender white surfboard cuts through the autumn sky like a saber. Jesper lifts his beauty above his head and casts haughty glances at the windsurfers in the water. You could spend 2 hours in the water in this wetsuit, playing around on the same dying wave as 10 other guys. No, Jesper is going to his spot. He already feels, deep in his chest cavity,
how the waves are swelling there, waiting for him. A skirt shines in the dark of the pine forest, fluttering around the skinny, tanned legs of a 14-year-old girl. The boys follow after, an echelon led by the flag that is Charlotte's skirt. How long had they been going like this? They'd never been to this side of the pine forest, where the sandy roads disappear into the muted green of blueberry shrubs. The familiar places were long behind them, the suspension bridges and the road that led up the cliff. Everything passes by in dim silence, occasionally interrupted by broken bits of conversation. Shadows lengthen on the dunes, and far in the distance, the curtain of trees gradually parts. The field ahead of them ripples in the salty sea breeze. A blood-orange sun hangs low in the sky above it. The sea of firmitories rustles as Charlotte's legs dissect in their knee-high socks. 6 long clock hands slide across the field, the girls running with relief and the boys following at their heels. Is it still Charlotte's, y'all? That field with the swaying reeds rising at its edges, where the brownish-beige carpet of hay transitions into a strip of fine white sand. Malin stops and takes off her shoes. Next to Con, she breathes the sea air gluttonously into her dress-clad chest. On the horizon, in the light blue mirror of the water, another sun blazes, fractured like an explosion by a gentle breeze. Inky splashes of cloud, black against the light, are torn apart above the water. The children stand there among the reeds, all of them shading their eyes with their hands, and the reed giants bow reverently to them from either side. Ani, in shorts, plops onto the sand, and Therese stoically sets the portable record player down next to her on a clump of reeds. He pulls out the antenna in the silence of the arrival and switches the shortwave radio to a popular youth station. Guitar pop sounds from the speakers, in stark contrast to Therese's defeated mood. The girl hadn't hugged him back. How stiff she had seemed, Charlotte, and how straight she had set herself on the heels of her strapped shoes. He doesn't dare to look at her now. He feels that something has broken in the meantime. He feels like something had broken. Such a thing brings to mind the Yugogradian massacre. When the buzz is gone, you'll find that our difficult nature comes out. After all, we are all Khoikos, with potato-colored hair and hazel eyes. But Malin, the radiant northerner, happily snaps her fingers at the sun and asks Khan, "Did you get it?" "We did," Jesper jumps in. He watches satisfaction bloom on the girls' faces as he digs out a paper bag from the bottom of his pocket. Malin spreads the beach towel on the sand, and Ani pulls 6 sparkling bottles of water out from the depths of the bag. The bottles are set in a line in the sand as Charlotte explains how it makes you extremely thirsty, how they'll have to fetch more water from the beach later. But that's all right. It will be an excellent adventure for the brave couple who dare to go. Shivers of excitement run through the boys at that word. Couple. Only Therese didn't notice. Therese is still thinking about the genocide. They sit on the beach towel, the 6 of them in a circle with the girls opposite the boys, and Charlotte tilts the pills out of the paper bag into her hand. The bag rattles. Everyone's noses press in closer as they watch 24 crimson-red diamonds sparkling in Charlotte's palm. She tosses the gem from one hand to the other, like tiny little pills jumping happily. One bounces off. The girl goes, "Oops," and Malin picks it up from the sand like a trinket. She blows on it carefully, gives her older sister a reproachful look, and then runs her finger over the surface of the pill
like a ruby polisher. Con sees how the girl's lips blush. They're the same color as the cherry speed.
Listen, be a good man. Tell me what it is.
Therese finally blurts out in the twilight on the playground. The zippers on the dealer, Ziggy's, leather jacket are jingling. It is yesterday evening, and a boy with black, greasy hair is walking on a seesaw. He places his jean-clad legs one in front of the other on the board, his arms outstretched for balance, and he begins.
You know how they say that drugs are a waste of your health?
The other end of the seesaw snaps to the ground as the boy passes the center.
An escape from reality, right? Pointless nonsense?
The question is rhetorical in nature. Ziggy answers it himself.
They're right. Nose candy makes you a bastard. Pop makes you an idiot. Stay away from that crap. It dulls the mind, and frankly, it's dangerous for an underdeveloped organism. It's not worth it.
Ziggy jumps off the seesaw, sand flying up from under his sneakers.
But this particular drug, those people can only make such generalizations because they haven't yet.
He pulls a paper bag out of his back pocket and shakes it under Therese's nose.
Done Samaran meth. You can't even imagine how lucky you are right now. What a waste. I don't even understand why I'm even selling it. Why don't I do it all myself now?
Ziggy's black eyes glisten in the dimness.
This stuff is so new that it doesn't even have a name yet. Girls call it cherry speed. Boys call it Samaran amph. It comes from the People's Republic of Samara. That's why. All good things in this world come from the People's Republic of Samara. They bring it in through the Pale, the world's first communist-invented street drug. Over there, the entrepreneurs do it, in the Pale, to be fearless. But to throw a party? It's a very pioneering way of thinking, very progressive. Flying communist. That's what they say about it in Grad. But I say. You want to know what I personally say?
Shadows are cast beneath Ziggy's cheekbones. His black eyebrows and the creases in the corner of his eyes take on a sly look.
What?
Therese asks.
Matrimony, says Ziggy. I say, a matrimony of matter.
Little Inayat Khan sits cross-legged across from Malin and watches as, without the slightest warning, she pops the pills into her mouth, like candy. The screw cap of the bottle crackles, and Malin wipes the water from her lips.
Well, she asks briskly, what are we doing anyway? Let's down it now. It's a good 45 minutes before it starts working anyway. Waiting around is annoying.
You took 2?
Charlotte is freaked out.
Stupid.
So what? Grunts Therese, and Khan feels terrified next to his friend, the freckled absurdist philosopher. Still thinking about the Yugo-Gradian massacre, Therese crunches the pills in his mouth. He doesn't drink any water. The sugary, bittersweet chemical fizzes in his mouth, but Therese doesn't really care.
I took it too. Flying communist,
he says, and swallows before stretching his arms out like aeroplane wings.
Okay, stop, Charlotte shouts.
Ani sulks.
2 is too many. Start with half. What are we going to do with you now? Shall we call an ambulance?
It's not necessary, Malin says with a smile.
Last time, I did a whole one right away at the beginning, and, it was really good. I think it'll be twice as good now. What do you think, Therese?
I think there are bank robberies for which less preparation has been done than for this evening,
Khan suddenly blurts out, to his own surprise.
Look, gas lanterns, in case it gets dark.
He angrily unpacks 3 lanterns from Therese's backpack, which he has now confiscated.
And extra water.
A keg filled with water clangs as it drops into the sand.
Because Ziggy said that under this... Honestly, I still don't get what the name is. Under this thing, everything tastes disgusting. And everything's already getting, I don't know, strange. Exactly. Charlotte lifts a single crimson tablet into the air between her fingers. She looks at Con, whose budding leadership qualities confuse her, and announces expectantly, "Skull?" "Skull," answers Con, and Jesper watches as his nerdy deskmate and Charlotte reach for water bottles together. Only Ani still hesitates in front of him, rolling the cherry speed in her palm. "Well?" She looks at Jesper, hands propping up her chin. "Skull?" Jesper casts a careless glance over her head, at the curve of her butt in her side-slit summer pants, in her crooked knees, her feet with flip-flops dangling off them sloppily. The girl smirks. She doesn't swallow right away, letting the spit melt on her sharp tongue. "It's sweet like that. Disgustingly sweet. I really like it. I think I like it because I know what it does to me. You would also like it if you knew." The girl looks at Jesper, and Jesper looks over her legs. The sun explosion out in the water has cooled. A sudden gust of wind makes the reeds around them whisper. Everyone is silent and listens. The boy puts the pill in his mouth and feels the saccharin glistening on his tongue. He hesitates a moment more and then swallows. The gall of fear rises up against the object going down his throat. The acidic environment of his stomach cavity reacts, unsuspectingly disintegrating the crimson diamond. Binding agents and dye effervesce. Before his eyes, the waves wash over the beach, as quietly as if in a dream, and the seagulls cry, "To this fading world." The boy in the white sailor hat is now nothing more than a traveler, at the mercy of the semi-synthetics. Jesper surrendered himself, going last out of the 6, but still voluntarily, like all the others. He still doesn't know it yet, but already his underdeveloped metabolism is scattering microscopic flakes of carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. A non-naturally occurring combination of elementary particles settles inside him. Nothing here depends on him anymore. Everything depends on them. They have their own plan, and they have 45 minutes before it goes into action. They become compatible with him. They shape new patterns of behavior. They take over like silent weapons in a secret war. But nothing in this quietly floating rain of psychopharmacology can reach the level of the blizzard devastating Malid Lund's 13-year-old body. Khan watches, head bowed, as the girl stands up in front of him and undoes her ash-blonde braid. Her hair flutters in the wind. As if proudly expecting a child, she places her hands upon her belly. Under her white polka-dotted dress, her metabolic center works overtime. She can already feel morning sickness upsetting her mid-digestion tenderness. The phenethylamines whizzing against her pink, petal-veined skin. The ultimate synthesis of amphetamines. Non plus ultra. Her body wants to get rid of the intruder, but she is so brave, she keeps it all inside. She's also clever. She hasn't eaten all day, and she is also beautiful. Very beautiful. On the cover of a girl's magazine, like beads on an abacus, 12 diamonds stand in a row. At first, there were 24 of them. Charlotte took one, Ani took one, Jesper took one, and Khan took another. Therese took 2. Run the numbers yourself. As the wind ruffles Malin's hair, she already feels how everything is flooding behind her blood-brain barrier, her silent secret. An apocalyptic whirlwind of serotonin rises in her. Well, what can she say? Malin Lund has wicked kitten teeth and soft curves.
She has straight A's on her 8th grade report card, and she really likes to enjoy herself. The 6 of them sit silently in a row, with their hands on their knees. Anticipation, the edge of the horizon, is a dusky gold. The sun is sinking into the water, and there is a dirty blue-green plume in the sky above it. Malin measures the remaining time with her thumb like an hourglass. The sun is setting behind her thumb, and every moment the dome of the sky beyond the back of the child's head sinks into a darker and darker blue. The stars light up, one after the other, and in the silence you could hear the sand at the water's edge, fizzing under the receding waves like a bottle of lemonade. Jesper stands on a solitary stretch of beach. 20 years lie behind him, and in front of him, waves rise out of the ocean. He holds the white sword blade of the surfboard up by his right side, and his other hand rests expectantly on his hip. Jesper wears black rubber for this occasion. As always, a full-body wetsuit. His light blue eyes look out of the eye holes like a bank robber's mask. His mouth, through the mouth hole, is red from cold. The empty beach says its annual greeting to Jesper. The coastline has changed a lot. The width has crept over time like quicksand, but the basic layout always remains the same. Jesper slowly steps through the reeds and into the ocean. The 10-degree water of the North Sea clings tightly to his rubber suit, getting deeper and deeper with every step. Despite the suit's cold-resistant neoprene skin, body heat is lost to the water. It happens over time, imperceptibly. After up to 3/4 of an hour, hypothermia begins. The waves beat at his waist and swell before him in the dark gray gloom. Jesper drags himself onto the board on his stomach and starts rowing. The water splashes against the board, and the waves break around him as he rises into them. The farther he goes, the higher they rise, until finally he can no longer row through the crests of the waves. Before the swell can lift him up, Jesper presses the sharp nose of the board under the water and dives. The hypothermic icy water explodes against him. The currents swirl around him in an underwater vortex. It burns in his eyes like molten metal. The jet-black silhouette of Jesper slides against the bottomless grave of the sea, pushing the glowing white line of the surfboard into the darkness.
"What comes next? What does it feel like?" asks Therese at last.
When Charlotte, together with Ani, conveys to the boys the heightened physical sensations and indescribable sense of ecstasy, it all shifts above them like a high-pressure system in the darkening dome of the sky. Khan is possessed by a strange indifference to the situation. He blinks his eyes behind his diamaterialist glasses, breathes calmly, and feels himself, his overweight body around him, his fluff and excitedly beating heart, as if none of it is a part of him any longer. Malin apologetically moves to Khan's side, and they separate from the group. Khan's quiet horizon-striped world feels calm to be in. It seems like the Ilmaran tricolor, that vibrant combination of colors that comes to mind when the girl thinks of Khan, has cooled down into a night sky. Malin tells him as much, and at the same time warns him that there is still much more to come of such openness today, when that hits.
Very good,
Khan nods, and moves ever closer to his new self, the self which the industrial empathogen is making him into. For the night ahead, and for the rest of his life, when he needs to, he returns to this place, where everything is fine, Everything is under control.
And, by the way, that's where it comes from. The colors of the evening sky. Turquoise, violet, and orange. They're so bright on the flag because Ilmarad doesn't have the right pigments in the soil. They don't occur naturally there.
That's their misfortune.
That and the insanely bleaching sun. That's why they seem to have bad taste. But really, it's like that because of the soils and the sun. They'd like to do more peaceful things, but they can't.
Malin nods.
You know, sometimes I just don't have anything to add, especially to something like this. I don't know anything about colored soils, but I like what you say. So you don't pay it any mind, all right? No, you don't have to apologize. I know it's interesting. The soil colors of Ilmarad, the pale crossing capability of antique airships, even the nonsense I told you when I sent you home. No one needs to tell me that.
They laugh quietly, as if hiding their joke from others. Khan finally falls silent and lifts his chin to the ocean again.
And what would you say? How is it? That feeling when it hits?
I don't know why, but I'm in a colorful mood right now, Malin explains, and Khan calmly nods to her.
I would say it's black, very dark, a very good darkness.
Khan nods again. He begins to quietly enjoy this new demeanor that has opened up for him. He'd like the whole world to talk to him about everything, and Khan would quietly nod back, showing his humble approval. Inayat Khan's approval. This is not a joking matter. He feels his palms sweat, his hands go numb. Malin tells him that it's supposed to be that way. This is all completely normal. It means it's coming soon. It's about to hit. Khan suddenly looks at the creature in front of him with fervent care, and the creature looks back at Khan. He wants all the best for her. She trembles slightly, her teeth chattering as she squeezes a beach towel in her sweaty hands. Beautiful thoughts flash behind Malin Lun's dark green eyes. Her serotonergic neurons are being reassembled in the tree branch network of her synapses. This law, this terrible thing called mood swings, original sin, serotonin reuptake, is being suppressed. This chemical cycle that teases Malin Lun with its meager rations of sweets, day after day, from school morning to evening, and then again when her homework is done, it stops working now. And not only that, but her neurons also pump the unused amounts with unnatural kindness. The girl is drenched in its inky black, its overripe clusters of delicious juice, pure liquid intoxication. 50s guitar pop blares in and out from the portable record player. Her transport proteins keep pumping out more and more pleasure, and all of it becomes so much that neither her body nor her mind can react yet.
I'm afraid, Mullet suddenly says. It's somehow different from last time. I can still hear you, but everything else is just spinning. I feel like... I don't know how I feel.
The girl's breathing speeds up visibly. She turns her back to her older sister and says quietly over her shoulder,
"It's so hot, Lotta. Be good. Pull my dress over my head."
"What, already?" Charlotte quickly glances at the clock, and with her other hand pulls down the zipper on the back of Malin's dress. There should still be 15 minutes left to go. Of course, it could also be less this time. Malin's voice is weak, an intermittent string.
My head is spinning. I can't see anything.
She raises her hands in the air.
"It's okay,"
says Khan calmly. He hasn't lost his nerve. The more complicated the situation becomes, the calmer Khan feels. He's still quietly blinking his eyes and breathing in and out. The coolness of the rolling ocean spreads before his eyes, always so vast and disinterested.
"If your head is spinning, close your eyes," says Con.
And he thinks that, at least for now, it would be gentlemanly not to look her way. The white wrapping paper of her dress rustles in the air as Charlotte lifts it in one go over Malin's head. The girl is barely breathing.
"My God, I'm afraid. My God."
She collapses between her sister's knees. Her blushing lips call out in the dark, seagull-like,
"It hit."
Con can't stop looking any longer. The crown of Malin's hair ripples across Charlotte's dress. Her swimsuit-clad body glows in her sister's arms. Her eyes are widened to mydriasis. Huge black discs, wells of pupil without the slightest hint of her green irises. The five of them sit in a circle around her. Malin looks at Con.
"How are you so calm?" she asks.
Con looks away from the softness of her body, the joints shifting feverishly before his eyes. He looks at the cold North Sea, into which the sun has sank. The dark shadows of the ghastly clouds are disintegrating.
"I don't know,"
says Inayat Khan, taking his wet glasses off and wiping them with a handkerchief, as he always does.
"I think it's probably kicking in. I felt abnormally calm for some time now."
Charlotte caresses Malin's head.
"It might be. It came on slowly for me the first time, too. Are your palms sweating?"
"Charlotte, my hands sweat all the time. But yes, I think they're sweating now, too." Malin slides around in her sister's dress like she's between cool bedsheets. She rubs herself in there, in the cradle, in the nursery bed. The fabric of her dress crawls around her like starched laundry, smelling so pleasant and airy. Her body is only 13 years old, but in the red twilight of her central nervous system, rivers of oxycontin have already been unleashed, like in postpartum bliss. Favor and trust flow over her almost sprouted mammary glands. Orgasm hormones rises like yeast in the warmth of her fatty tissues, and she blushes through the waves of care. She loves everyone. Ani looks at her rolling around with envy.
"Humph, you're feeling pretty good already." "My God, how good I'm feeling," exclaims Malin. "You can't even imagine how good it is. Say something nice. It's beating so loudly. I'm afraid that otherwise things will get very sad."
"That can happen." Charlotte nods her noble head and presses her hand against Malin's chest to check, then pulls back in horror, as if she had touched a stove iron.
"My God, your heart is beating so fast, like a horse's gallop. Can you hear it?"
Ani lowers her ear to her sister's chest.
"Malin, how much did you take? Tell me honestly."
2 pills, Malin lies. She didn't take 2. She took 6. She strokes Ani's smooth hair with one hand and finds Khan's hand above her with the other. She presses it to her chest as well, in her need for closeness, and breathes.
"Everything is fine. Believe me, everything is exactly as it should be. God, how good I'm feeling."
She shakes her head slowly, cautiously, as if she would be retreating from cold and heat waves. It speeds up in front of her, the horses' mouths foaming. The matter rages, ravages.
"I haven't had such a good time in my life. Everything is so soft. Feel it for yourself."
The girl presses Khan's hand firmly against her ribs. The circle of servants tightens around Malin. Khan straightens himself up as he sits above it all. He raises his chubby chin to the girl, proudly, an indescribable peace reigning in his heart. It already moved inside him, but the feeling is growing stronger and more sure by the moment. The dark-skinned boy stares out from under his furrowed brow, his diamaterialist glasses exaggerating the now darkening wheels of his eyes like magnifying glasses. He is the Lion of Cerber, a true Khan of nations.
Malin, listen. I think it just hit me. That magic.
He narrows his eyes. I infected you. The girl blushes and smiles generously at her firstborn. Khan exhales and feels how his breath is eerily warm against the girl, like a sword, and the world around him tingles darkly with its joy. The atmosphere vibrates. Everything comes through a noise filter. A flock of wandering grasshoppers chirp, rubbing their legs against the filaments from which everything is made. The throbbing heart attack runs through everything, even in the soft soil under Khan's hand, and in the warm darkness of Malin Lund's body, an emergency alarm sounds. The mad Suruese rally ace taps the wheels of his motor carriage in front of the house. It's getting worse and worse. The high frequencies float in his ears. Give him even a moment of quiet, and let Kenni wonder why it won't shift into third gear. It's concerning, really. He looks up at the door of the old wooden manor house, hanging open, and for a single clear moment, the world stops, snowflakes floating in midair. A roof shingle rises from the house, black against the dark blue expanse of the sky, and everything is calm, quiet. It falls back to earth. A silver puff of breath rises from Kenni's mouth into the stillness of winter. 70 years ago, Nadia Harnoncourt steps from the edge of the bridge into the void. Her gorgeous ball gown turns inside out, the dress fabric fluttering. She falls, her head tilted back, straight as a match, and through the white jellyfish of floating petticoats, she says goodbye to the world. The river Vera flows beneath her fall, a mercurial stream laced with foam, and from far, far away, sleigh bells sound, like from a childhood memory. Inayat Khan steps out of the country house's door alongside Therese Maciek. The tall ex-agent looks around in surprise in the silence. It's so beautiful to watch the snow float in the light of the wheel hub lamp that Therese has forgotten he's holding. Kenni waves to them from the motor carriage, one hand on his heart with relief. They manage to take 2 steps where Therese is still able to hear how the snow crunches under his shoe before the low frequencies suddenly explode. A deafening beat sounds, the windows shaking to its bass rhythm. Little Therese dances uncontrollably, forgetting himself like a Yucatan shaman. He waves his fingers in the air. They're numb and comfortable, and the world whispers around him. A gust of wind rustles through the rushes, cooling his sweaty forehead and bare upper body. The world's benevolence is inexhaustible. The Yugograd massacre never happened, and František the Brave is coming with the SRV Revolutionary Army behind him, waving white flags. Therese could ask anything of the world, but he doesn't dare look at what's moving right in front of him. It's not a part of this world anymore. Only the low tones of a bass drum, coming from the mono, reflect in the black mirror of their hearing. The 6 of them are hiding among the rushes. It had seemed like a good idea to all of them.
Let's go. Yes, let's go over there. Let's make a nest,
they squealed throughout. Khan lights gas lanterns in the dark. The gas has a disgusting, slug-like smell to his olfactory organs. The lighter flashes, and the lamp flickers to life. Blue tongues of fire dance in his glasses, and the surrounding rushes cast subtle shadows on the children. Khan looks at his handiwork and likes it. He likes the way the shadows flicker on Malin's cheeks. He is not afraid to tell her, and she's grateful to hear it. Malin Lund is saturated, overripe, wrapped in Charlotte's dress and her own white swimwear. Mentally, she can no longer reinterpret the floods of matter into well-being, but the clear cutting in her tissues continues. Matter is now punching the girl, brutally, jealously, and nothing in this feverish night shows signs of abating. It hits again, and Malin pushes her hands to the side from the direct impact. She chokes. The pleasant texture of the dress rubs on her lymph nodes, on the smoothness of her armpits. Her nipples are bumping against the tricot fabric, but the nerve endings have long been numb, too numb to notice. Its sensory units overheating. Her physical apparatus is incapable of receiving more intoxication. Bottled water spills from the girl's hand onto the beach towel, but no one notices it. Everyone keeps chattering around her. A warm reddish glow sticks to the insides of Malin's thighs. She sags, the blacks of her eyes glowing at one and the same frequency. Burnout mode. Bouquets of lilies, chrysanthemums, and red roses wither on the sand all around. She calms down. Her body collapses under the tension. "Please comfort me. It's too good," she murmurs. "It's too sad to be." The operetta star's eyes fly open. Nothing but whites. And regret. Gland, suffocating regret. What have I done? I, a foolish, foolish woman. Ice-cold water splashes into the lungs of Nadia's lifeless narration. Everything that Nadia has done will go down in history as a casing, lacking body heat, distorted. She's an imprint, a hallucination. Almost no one remembers who Nadia really was. They haven't even heard of her breakout hit in The Officer's Wife, and her sleazy number, The Shipboy's Mistress, is, at best, a historical curiosity, a ridiculous exaggeration of its era. She's been forgotten. She's grown old. What can a nice dress mean to her anymore? There's nowhere to go out. But above the water's flickering surface, the chandeliers are still being lit. Everything is yet to come. Piccolo flutes, her favorite instruments, and brisk fanfare. What a splendid sound! The rolling thunder of the timpani, the sound of water in Nadia's ears, is like a furor, life, ovations, and warm, warm tributes. She comes back to the surface, and the people, young and beautiful, are there with her once again. It seems to Nadia that a real party is going on. The world will probably end soon. "No," says František the Brave. "There are still 8 years. What a pleasant young man, and what cheekbones, like a steppe eagle. 8 years? But then everything is still possible." "Yes, everything is possible for this world," says František the Brave. Ani, the younger sister, gives Malin bottled water with the care of a nurse, and Khan parts the rushes with his hands like the curtains revealing the sea waves. He begins to speak. A couple of silhouettes are frolicking against the backdrop of dark, splashing water. They're dancing, one madly, and the other in the same rhythm, but 3 times slower. Ani wraps her burning sister in a cocoon of dress fabric. Charlotte herself hatched out of there a while back. She had downed her second one 40 minutes ago. She comes to Therese through the darkness, in a whirlwind of dancing, and opens his eyes with her voice. The half-naked girl puts a water bottle in the boy's mouth and says, "Therese, yoo-hoo! You have to drink or you'll get heat stroke. And you guys too," she shouts behind her. "Don't forget to drink water." The boy takes the bottle from her and pours. His thirst is unquenchable. This way, as cool as water, his zeal finally subsides. A blissful chemical calm crushes the boy under its weight. Thumbs absently hooked in the hem of her golden panties, Charlotte Lund moves her newly hatched body in front of him. She nods along to the pounding rhythm of the bass drum, her head slightly bowed and her eyes closed. She gives a quick smile. A momentary sound rings out. Charlotte only laughs at her own jokes this way. This breaks Therese down, this and the half-dose he secretly downed. He hears a tremor of laughter echoing there, in the mystery of the stranger's cerebral cortex. How would it be to laugh that laugh? It's not about anything or with anything. It doesn't even consist of words anymore. It's long gone, lost to Therese. Maciejek came down the stairs in his school uniform. How was he supposed to know that only complete outcasts wear school uniforms in Vasa? Like the guys who scrub the walls. He only just arrived there. The eldest Lund girl came down the stairs, her booties clicking on the stepping stones, and handsome Alexander, the girl's 10 out of 10 friend, had his eloquent mouth going on enviable tours. Therese followed them into the cafeteria queue like a shadow. Charlotte Lund normally never goes to the school canteen. She doesn't eat. She has no metabolism for this world. But handsome Alexander charmed her into tagging along. Therese Maciejek from the 8th grade stood behind Charlotte and poured himself some Moors. The girl turned around and reached for the Moors ladle. Therese handed her the ladle. And so it happened. "You are Charlotte Lund," Therese mumbled the girl's semi-mythical name. "And you are?" "Therese Maciejek," said Therese Maciejek. And there it had stayed. Charlotte's satin hair caresses her shoulders as she shakes her head in time with the music. She raises her arms above her head, the webs of her fingers touching in the air, and under her collarbones are small, taut, bare breasts and white tan lines. She laughs. "It just hit, Therese Maciejek," and happily shakes her head from side to side. "I just got it." In the sand where Therese Maciejek is kneeling, the girl peels off her dark blue knee sock with her other foot. And when she crouches down in front of him, Therese Maciejek says, "Me too." Waves of heat and cold collide above them. The gold of the panties sparkles between her thighs, and Therese watches, selfishly, with the asexuality of a child. Just, well, it's beautiful to look at. They collapse on each other like houses made of matches, free of lust, just for fun. Therese, Khan, and the mad Suruese driver look outside, their heads tilted back, as the pail approaches from behind the house. Inside, the bass drums thump robustly, and outside, behind the silhouette of the building, the dark mass of the forest rolls up to the sky across the entire visible horizon. The pail rises vertically from the spruce forest like a wave, from the mountain ranges above the expanse of the world. Its horror moves slowly, humming over the world. But the world is made of matter, and matter is evergreen, ancient. It sustains itself with surprising dignity, even at the moment of disappearance. It smiles magnanimously, generously. As František the Brave once smiled, behind the waste disposal facility. The peaks of the mountains darken to black. The clearings expand. The frosty spruce fields sparkle under the stars.
I'm not K. Voronikin or anything, but...
Therese puffs in the cabin of the motor carriage. He rummages around on the seat. Khan stands outside, leaning on the car with his foot, copying Kenny's posture.
But?
Therese climbs backwards out of the machine, holding a bottle of berry wine.
But it seems to me that in half an hour, this will all be pale, Khan.
Say what? What did he say?
Nothing, Kenny. I wouldn't listen to him. He's not K. Voronikin or anything. Therese unscrews the cap on the berry wine with a crackle and puts the bottle to his mouth. He'd rather not speak anymore.
It's an oceanographic myth, the killer wave.
Little Khan points in the direction of the body of water. The four of them watch from the safe warmth of a beach towel. Insects buzz in the dark, around the glass lanterns.
For a long time it was just that, a myth, a sailor's tale. Arda even has a mythological name for it. Halderdinger. But now they're a scientifically documented phenomenon. They really exist, you understand? This explains the dozens, hundreds of missing ships. They also say deserter wave, Dropner wave, and my favorite, weird wave. It comes seemingly out of nowhere and is well above the level of the rest of the waves. Therefore, the killer wave can also be relatively small. But, for example, in the case of a 10-meter waves, they are the highest scientifically measured waves in the world. Oh yes, I've seen documentary footage of it.
Khan's chin trembles, demonstrating the uplifting incredulity of the footage.
Taken from a Mesk mid-ocean oil rig. You can't even imagine what a monster it is.
Khan feels his tongue and mind working in complete unison. Everything comes out perfectly. He had been inept with language, his mind incomplete, but not now. May it remain so forever. He's forgotten his hand in the air. It still represents the awe-inspiring height of a killer wave in a 10-meter swell. Malin looks at how it hangs in the sky. A morbid burst of interest saves her from the clutches of her own body. She now knows what she needs. She should top up, just a little bit. Then everything would start again, but even stronger. The girl's gaping mouth gulps in the air. She greedily pours water from the bottle. The water beads on her mouth.
Where do they come from?
It's maths, right?
Jesper is sitting with his hands under his head.
Some mathematical rule explains this?
Exactly,
Khan replies.
A non-linear effect. I won't act like I know what the deal is either, but whatever. It turns out that a killer wave can come together from any number of smaller waves based on some formula. If they move in a large body of water, such as an ocean, chances are that one day they will give birth to a near-vertical, extremely unstable wave monstrosity. It absorbs the energy of the movement of other waves, and the water pulls around it more tightly. The normal wave turns into flickers, and the killer wave almost collapses under its abnormal weight. But before that, there's huge potential for destruction that it can, sow, if you will.
Khan finishes with a big gesture.
And you know where they occur most often in all the world? Here. The autumn swell of the North Sea is the name of this phenomenon. Totally fucked up,
Ani burst out laughing, her foul language quietly unleashed. The girl's eyes have long been darkened by mydriasis. She looks at the water from among the rushes, and it seems to little Ani that at any moment a completely fucked up killer wave could rise from it. But instead, Therese appears with Charlotte.
And you know what's the most fucked up thing about it? Con asks slyly.
He wipes his diamaterialist glasses and then puts them back on. His almond eyes squint behind the magnifying lenses, filled to the brim with popular science mystique.
The same effect, don't ask me how, I don't know, but the same non-linear effect also explains the pale. They use it in entreprenetics. This is how the pale behaves when it sweeps over the world.
As big as wagon wheels, says Charlotte, looking into the boy's eyes. You really have it on. By the way, Con, if I may say?
Yes, you can say,
young Inayat nods.
You are extremely wise for your age.
Charlotte's voice is ladylike and sincere. Con feels flattered by her compliment.
And you have very, very good posture,
the boy replies, and the girl laughs heartily. The crossfire of tributes and expressions of support roars like an ocean. Everything flickers like a flame, and suddenly Ani raises her head in the middle of it. She moves with the agility of an otter, craning her neck as if searching for something.
Wait a second, she says. Is the water out?
Jesper doesn't notice how Ani's look is directed at him, or how everyone is waiting. He's still staring at the sea, as if charmed, with his white sailor's cap on the back of his head. He doesn't feel anything special. He's relatively sober. He's just feeling hot. It's all a slight disappointment for Jesper. He hasn't even gotten to snog or anything. But killer waves, they're not too shabby. The man in the wetsuit gasps as he surfaces. He splurts ice-cold water out of his mouth and rolls himself onto his stomach on the surfboard. A single black dot named Jesper floats 1/2 kilometer from the beach, at the mercy of the waves. He looks at the chronometer on his hand. Another 1/4 of an hour, and then the critical limit of his body heat will have been exceeded. Rest is in order. Jesper tries to relax his muscles, shaking from lactic acid buildup. He looks behind him, at the streak of pine trees in Charlotte's Yawl, and at the dim sky above where cloud giants are slowly collapsing. Abreast of the waves, the board rises and falls to the rhythm of his breathing. Everything is suddenly so quiet. Where did all my waves go? Forever and always, those 5 famous, terrible last words. Why do you leave me here? I stay firm to myself. I cry to every god like a wave. Will you stay this time? Will you stay this time? Are you staying this time, or what? A terrible roar is approaching. Jesper gets up, straddling the board, peels the rubber mask down to the back of his head, and looks, a lock of blonde hair on his face. Beyond the tiny speck that is his surfboard, the dark gray foam lace wall of the tidal wave rises, like a cell membrane. It rises vertically, until the fizzing foam of the ridge hides the sky from Jesper. The swell of the wave lifts the surfboard onto its back. The famous interior designer rows with all his might on it. He tries to turn himself into the wave. But the Halderdinger moves with tremendous speed.
It's such a pity, Ani sighs generously. I wish you could feel good too.
They're standing under a lamppost on an asphalt road, and at the point where the asphalt crumbles into the sand, the enormous beach of Charlotte's Yawl begins. 45 minutes of forest darkness and heavy chatter are behind us. How nice it was to talk, just the two of us. Jesper holds the keg under the dark red water pump and pumps. The water sings as the vessel fills.
Well, I'm not feeling bad either. It's nice to talk to you, and the others also look pretty happy. And I do feel something is happening, but Khan speaks as if he has some kind of heavenly peace, and Malin is roasting. Exactly. That'd probably be the right word.
Jesper puts the cap on the keg and fills 2 water bottles. Putting them in his pocket, he looks questioningly in Ani's direction. Bugs beat themselves desperately against the street lamp, and the little girl rubs her bare legs together. The gas lantern hangs from her hand. The fuzzy hairs on her legs glow under the electric light. Ani's smile, like an idea spreading across her mouth, makes Jesper wonder.
I know, she says. You're more like a nose boy anyway, with your perfume talk.
Jesper crouches opposite the girl on the asphalt, and a single pill glitters in the middle of the mirror from Ani's purse.
We need some kind of mortar, something hard, she says,
and when the excited Jesper comes back with his stone, she already has her eyeshadow container in her hand.
But thanks anyway.
Ani carefully crushes the chalky surface of the pill and grinds the pieces into a soft crimson powder on top of the mirror. She licks the rim of the tin with her tongue and then carefully takes a 5 real bill from her wallet. Jesper watches this ritual with excitement. How Ani folds the black banknote in the middle and separates the powder into stripes on the eye of the mirror. They run parallel, like rails. The 5 real bill rolls into a tube between the girl's fingers.
So, you close one nostril, just like this, with your finger, and insert this into the other.
She demonstrates the process to Jesper with the rolled-up note.
And then, with one long breath, you pull the whole strip up your nose. Let me show you.
Ani Elin Lund is kneeling in front of the water pump under the streetlight. The asphalt glistens as the girl bends over the mirror. Jesper, in his white sailor suit, watches as she busily pulls the strip up her nostril. All the powder disappears inside the paper roll in a single voracious movement. It all seems absolutely wonderful to Jesper. Ani, groaning, hits the back of her little head and hands him the banknote.
It stings a bit, but pleasantly. It also starts hitting faster. But then again, it doesn't last as long. Do it.
And Jesper does. In the tube of the black banknote, drug powder swirls and bends. The crystals break capillaries. His nostrils itch and sting. And when Jesper stands up, everything is so quiet and beautiful. They go down into the forest together, the gas lantern rustling in Ani's hand and casting long, moving shadows from the tree trunks into the darkness of the dunes. Jesper pushes himself up from his stomach onto the board with a fluid movement. The roar of water rolls behind him, and the interior designer presses his heel down on the wedge of the board. In an instant, the resistance becomes minimal. Everything is perfect. He's gliding through the water. The board no longer touches the water. It floats on a vibrating cushion of air. Zigzagging, Jesper surfs up and down the face of the wave until he's back at the crest. You can hear how it breaks from behind, collapsing under its own weight. A huge, glistening curtain of water pulls him into it as it falls. Jesper allows it to happen, staying behind and entering the darkness of the tube, where this landscape that exists only for a small unit of time, a complex, elusive dynamic model, achieves stability in its collapse. A wave collapse is a permanent environment, a dim, almond-shaped cavity in the raging maelstrom of water. It's smooth and quiet in there. If it only lasted forever, it would be the summer of 52. The summer of 52 is a perpetually collapsing object. It is eating him alive. Something is wrong with this cluster of memories. Terribly wrong. It's as if he isn't possible anymore. The world does not support him. But here, for 10 seconds, everything stabilizes. Jesper strokes the water wall, and his mouth, red from the cold, always says, "Please." In the yard, where the wheels of the motor carriage have drawn a loop in the snow, Inayat Khan looks up at a farm building that hovers above him like a ghost. Electrical wire entrails hang out of the rotating object, black against the expanse of the starry sky. It drifts on into the pale with a self-evident calm. Up above, a trail of its furniture and crumbling foundation remains. In the yard in front of him, Khan watches how a startled Therese and Kenni follow the object's path, their heads tilting back until they have hit the wooden fence behind them. In a strange, panic-free concern, they all look in the direction of Ulf's crumbling house. It seems as if every little crack comes from its limestone foundation. Soon it will rise up. But nothing happens. The pail freezes it in place, far away, behind the house. The creaking of the forest stops, and the music in the house also stops. Somewhere in the perceptible distance, on the edge of the frozen pail above, the farmhouse falls apart and disappears. Ulf, dripping with sweat, comes to the door and lights a menthol cigarette. He has taken off his sweatshirt and, framed in the doorway, he steams in a tracksuit and a silver tank top. The self-chiller shakes his curly head, and drops of sweat fly. When Therese and Khan rush towards him, the man suddenly looks behind him and starts. "Take them!" Ulf yells, running toward them across the yard with envelopes in his hand. He waves roughly up towards the pail and puts the papers in Khan's hand. "You have to go, now!" The engine revs up, and the carriage's wheels spin in the snow. The mass of the pail can no longer support its phantom weight. It breaks down. The vast clearings crumple under it in an instant, exploding with powder snow. A collapse like a shock wave whirls over the world. Spruce trees bow under the blow, and the pale blast opens the windows of the old decaying manor house. It arches around the edges of the house, as if hesitating for a moment, and then explodes together, encompassing it. The pail grabs the manor in its lap, and somewhere inside, in a room with a low ceiling, the young man puts on his headphones. He reads the sweeping pail like a magnificent reader reads a stereo 8 tape. The only indication of the Lund children moving in that lifeless imprint is some Jesper's quaint, impossible memory of them. The pail blows across the fields, on both sides of the village road. Its avalanche crashes onto the gravel. The rumbling wall approaches, glowing crimson from the motor carriage's tail lights. Chained wheels screech on the stone. "Go, go, go, go!" the mad Suruese race alley yells to his machine. Like a command to a horse, he presses his foot further down on the already floored gas pedal, as if the car would go faster than it already is. And looking at the speedometer, it seems like it might. Therese watches the pointer jump on 200 in the yellow light of the panel. Next to him, Khan sees the pail. It shifts quietly but firmly across the windows. The electric lightning in the cabin dims. His glasses are fogging up. He's pressed deep into the leather seat from the acceleration, and he holds 2 envelopes against his heart. Behind his foggy glasses, you can't see Khan's eyes going teary with joy.
"I was right, Therese. I was right all along,"
he says, but Therese doesn't hear him. The engine drones too loudly. Jesper and Ani come through the fumitories in the light of the gas lantern. Jesper is now holding both the lantern and the water keg, and Ani is only holding her shirt. In the glow of the bluish flame, Jesper reads the birthmarks on her arched kitten-like back. Only the delicate straps of her bra still hide them. How pleasantly the fumitories rustle, stroking his leg under his shorts. Little Jesper, terribly thirsty, sips water from a bottle.
"It's divine, divine water. They should bottle it," he says, "and then they should sell it."
They're greeted at the beach by whoops of joy from the thirsty members of their group. Everyone hugs. By the light of the gas lamp, Ani wipes the lipstick from Jesper's mouth and laughs. Khan is sitting on Therese's shoulders and pretending that Therese is a robot. He turns his friend's head, and the other makes a robotic sound and turns to where Khan is leading them. Then, when robot Therese is knee-deep in the water, Khan is thrown off his shoulders. He manages to admire the jellyfish for a moment, but the others are already running after them in their swimsuits. Little glowing child bodies go into the water in the dark. Sand sinks under bare feet. Silky water laps around ankles. Bodies hypersensitive to the substance react to every last touch. Plumes of sand rise between Ani's toes, so she curls her toes into a nice ball and carefully steps forward. They all go very slowly, hands floating on the cool surface tension of the water. They squeal at times, making the most of every moment of their anointing ecstasy. And the ointment itself receives them, flowing around their hips and tummies. It's cool and flawlessly vicious. Malin cannot. Once the water moistens her breasts and armpits, she sinks completely into it. Only the hymn of surrender remains on the surface of the sea. She digs her nails into her palms and feels momentarily like she will break. It won't fit inside her. Hormones are already distorting her slippery body. Her pelvis has expanded for birth. Unbearable well-being is throbbing deep in her hips. In the grave of her bodily fluids, a tiny homunculus closes its pin-sized eyes. The animal, curled up in a semicircle, opens its mouth to scream. But there is nothing, no sound. It had never even been there. Malin loosens. Everything is so impossibly good. Everything goes dark and echoes there, in the depths of the water. Charlotte's glowing white shadow slides past her, and she feels someone's soft hands around her shoulders. It's Khan. He lifts her to the surface, and she breathes in the salty air, floating there. Water drips from her hair, and the black sky above shines with an endlessly detailed bouquet of stars, like splashes of milk. All 6 of them look up and bob there like that, in a semicircle. The stars shine in the black mirror of the water. They flicker faintly, scattered. Only Inayat Khan's spectacle lenses reflect all their brilliant sharpness.
"They are no longer there."
Khan hears a weakening voice between his arms. He looks down, the stars sliding off his glasses. In place of the stars, Malet Lun's eyes shift, and the darkness of her mouth moves to shape every word.
"But I still see them."
And then, when they woke up in the morning, among the reeds, Like kittens in a nest, they collect their garbage properly. They put their sun-dried clothes back on. In the blindingly bright light, their eyes hurt, and the world around seemed foreign in a friendly way. Everything had been said yesterday, in the dark of the night, and there was no need to repeat it. They went to the tram stop smiling awkwardly and chattering tiredly. There they agreed to a meeting in the last week of August. The girls would be back from their family trip to Grad by then. They couldn't say the exact day, so they would call and send postcards. At the meeting at the end of August, they also planned to discuss what the changed state of affairs would look like at school, and in the real world in general. There was no kissing or anything like that at the station. However, a lot of looks were exchanged, filled with secret bodily messages and the regret of leaving. The girls got on the tram, and the boys went to Therese's father's cottage. That was the last time they saw each other. Chapter 14. List of Absentees. 20 years later, near Vasa, a crowd of refugees is stuck in a traffic jam. The 60 million square kilometer landmass of the Katla Isola just lost 6% of its total area. The illuminated sign on the motorway announces, "All lanes for entry." The red river of taillights shines in the autumn night, and somewhere in the middle of the giant traffic jam sits the machine in which Therese Maciejek has been asleep for a long time now. Steam rises from under its hood. Mud-spattered radials arc over its sides. The nickel gills of the motor elements shine under the black plates that make up the motor carriage body. Inayat Khan is also curled up in the cabin, though he's not sleeping yet. He savors every passing moment, despite being, and precisely because he is, dead tired. The leather of the seats creaks under him, and through his blissful half-sleep he can hear newsroom airships outside. The propellers whir at a safe distance. The dark vortex of sleep beckons and swirls. Khan goes in and out of it as he pleases. Sometimes the machine jerks and moves a few meters. Then the desoperatist opens his eyes and sees Kenni walking by. The mad Suruese rally ace chats with the other drivers and scrapes frost off his windshield. The present moment is one that Khan knows about. He will pine for it. He already misses the diamonds of the headlights, the blood-red glow of the taillights in the exhaust smoke, the knowledge that everything will be all right. It was 20 years ago when he last felt this way, full of possibilities, back when they were waiting together for the girls to return from Grad. Out in the world, behind his closed eyelids, the kingdom of God begins. He presses his hands to his chest and embraces his invisible companion. All those spaces, the expanses there in the fallow fields and beside the highways, are opportunities for gatherings. As usual, conversations unfold in the darkness of Khan's thought cabinet. Malin Lun walks there beside him, nods and listens and asks questions. She laughs at his jokes, like she has for 20 years. They sit down on the side of the expressway. He doesn't mind. The girl's body has remained untouched by time. She still looks like a child, but her spirit has moved on with Khan. Fully grown up, all grown up. She has weight to her now, mysterious and sad. 2 months passed, but the meeting at the end of August never happened. Although the girls returned to Vasa on the 15th of August, they didn't call. Why it was like that, and why they went to Charlottesville Beach 3 times during that period, remains a mystery. Through the blinds, the afternoon sun painted stripes on the walls. In the living room of Therese's father's cottage, the air stood still. Something rose up and made it hard to breathe. A vacuum. It was a sense of loss, a terrible, terrible worry. After several weeks of waiting by the phone in vain, they finally decided to call the girls themselves. The three of them stood in the living room. Therese hung up the phone. Beside him, Con was impatient.
What happened? They weren't at home, were they?
Their mother picked up.
Therese sinks into the armchair, baffled.
They said they were at the beach.
Which beach?
In Charlottesville.
What? Why haven't they called then?
I don't know. Something is wrong.
And then the argument happened. The one over which Therese attacked Jesper 2 days later. He had immediately wanted to run down to the beach, and Con was already tying his sneaker laces, only Jesper still thought that it wasn't cool to do that. He thought they should wait and let the girls call them. So that's how they stayed. And 15 minutes later, at 1 o'clock, Agnetha, the server at the ice cream shop, was the last living person to see the Lund children. It was the 28th of August, the International Day of Missing Persons. From that day on, things had never been cool again. He tries not to use the word. It sounds like an accusation. Frozen and gasping for air, the interior designer falls onto his back in the sand. Hypothermia. It smells like rotting reeds. Rushes and fumitories stick to the ground in the gusting wind. He's 34 years old. He stomps on the wet sand with his heels. He doesn't know how or why he managed it. When his joints were cramping from the cold, why didn't he just roll off the board into the sea? Why didn't he just stay inside the wave when it collapsed? In the dark autumn evening sky above, masses of clouds slowly sink into each other. He grabs his head with both hands and squeezes. His mouth, blue from the cold, opens slowly as gasps escape from his respiratory tract and his stomach undulates with contractions. He clenches his fists and digs his heels into the sand, but nothing changes. He remembers everything. The 52nd year still stands inside his skull, a strange, impossible museum exhibit, a replica of the lost world. The smell is ever sweeter and always the same, an irrefutable fact, the weight of which cannot be overstated. There is no going back. In his dream, he can hear the sound of horses galloping. They're coming on the black asphalt of the motorway. Jesper. Con wants to call him and tell him to get ready. This is the real deal now. But there is no telephone booth here. It's dark in the kingdom of God, and mounted policemen are combing the lines between the machines. The silhouette of a nightmare stops on the other side of the window pane. Con opens his eyes. Steam rises from the horse's nostrils, and it snorts, the moist black eyes glinting at the half-asleep Con. An officer on horseback directs a beam of light through the frosty glass into the cabin, and then moves along. The horseshoes echo on the asphalt, and the horse moves away. Con closes his eyes and falls asleep again. His arms wrap into an embrace around his chest. When they had finally fallen asleep, Con had heard a terrible voice in his dreams. It was on the night of that same day, the 28th of August, and with that voice horror descended upon the earth. At first he heard it in his sleep, how it moved closer and closer and called out at regular intervals, Madge, Ani, Malin, Charlotte. The boy woke up in the bedroom on the second floor. He looked into Therese's fear-dilated eyes as his friend stood over him and shook him. Khan was wide awake now, but the world's most dreaded list of absentees was still being read aloud, outside in Charlottesville. Not in his dream, but in the real world. The blood froze in Khan's veins.
"Do you hear that too?"
"Yeah," answered Therese. They woke Jesper up. They all pulled their jackets on over their pajamas and ran outside. It was cold, and for the first time this year, there was a smell of autumn in the air. They stopped in the garden and listened. The names echoed in the forest along with the barking of dogs. They ran through the apple orchard, past the gooseberry bushes, into the darkness of the pine forest. Lights from flashlights and spotlights flashed among the trees. Search parties. At the end of the 4th day, the volunteers were sent home. Hundreds of them had come. Everyone wanted to help in some way, to take part in the worry. Thousands of calls came in to a special hotline. Call to actions were made. Programs were run. The press and radio were getting bold, and the next morning the girls' pictures were right on the front cover. The headlines used the most disgusting sentimentality. Mother in despair. Children, please come home. Opinion columns discussed the possibility of reinstating the death penalty, and tearjerkers were mixed with a paranoid thirst for revenge. Who stole the children from their mother? This tumult of sympathy, in which the boy's own loss was completely lost, all this howling and gnashing of teeth, they felt powerless in the midst of it. It degraded them. At the time, it was just a hunch, but now Jesper can put his indignation into words. Backseat curiosity. Somewhere beneath his fuming, the obscene bourgeois saw with his own sweet sense of horror all the things that were done to the girls. Through the newspaper article, he was able to peek behind the blackout curtain, where Père Jonas did not dare to look directly. He saw himself there. He was the man. He gnawed on a meat piroshki, and he liked what he saw. But when the preteen Jesper looked at the girls from his class, it was an indescribable mystery, an alien kingdom of bodies. The arch of the back, the exposed arm, the slightest part was enough. To this day, he hates adult sexuality. To him, it's exhaustingly demanding. Realistically, and in a paradoxical way, this makes him a pedophile. The receptionist in the lobby of Hafsanglar hangs up the phone just as the standard of good taste walks in his full-body wetsuit. It's the middle of the night and he's dripping wet, leaving sandy footprints on the carpet. The gentleman looks so miserable, frozen half to death, that the woman forgets her telephone call and rushes to wrap him in a sauna towel.
"No, I don't need an ambulance,"
Jesper says through chattering teeth, waving them off.
"I don't want tea. I don't want it. I don't want blackcurrant tea either."
He calls the elevator, and even if it's already lit up, he keeps pushing the button with his numb, frozen finger.
"No, I don't want to. I'm going to take a bath. A hot bath."
"Mr. de la Gardie," the woman remembers at the last moment. She puts the toe of her shoe between the closing elevator doors. "You got a phone call from an Ole?"
"During the night? About what?"
"The newspaper ad." The volunteers were sent home, and after the search parties, all the others left as well. The pine forests went quiet, as they usually were in the autumn. The boys limped through them. Bloodhounds no longer barked. Border guard ships no longer roamed the bay. And wherever they went, it was as if the spirit of the void itself had been unleashed. Everything hung still and useless. Changing cabins, a sparse, half-empty beach. At the tram stop, the trams went back and forth empty, then half-empty, the doors creaking open and closed. The last to go were the ill-fated drivers, 3 weeks later. And so the boys saw the long surrender begin all around. What that meant, they knew very well, although they never dared to say the word to each other. Together, they came up with the most fantastic plans, exhilarating triumphs, returning together. The school year had already officially begun over a month ago, and the joint decision of worried parents sent them back to school. There, photos of the girls, flowers, and storm lanterns awaited them on the stairs. The fake grief drifted through the corridors as well. Everyone had somehow known them. Everyone was fighting for attention and comparing their losses. The boys disappeared there, too. They didn't dare tell anyone what had happened in the summer. Finally, they poured out their hearts to the female officer when she visited the school, and as a result, Sigismund Berg, a boy who by that time was already a known figure among the youth police, was interrogated, along with 200 others. This treachery didn't bear any fruit, and when the female officer came to talk to the principal at the end of November, the three of them broke out of the classroom. The corridor echoed with the sound of their indoor shoes. She was their only connection to the investigation, that heartless entity. They stopped her at the door and pressed her for information until the poor woman had no other options left. "We have to get used to the idea that the girls are dead," she said. The pictures and storm lanterns were collected from the school stairs. The death penalty was not reintroduced. Even Vidkun Hurd was only given a life sentence. A year after his disappearance, he was arrested on suspicion of crimes with a similar profile, and the press rushed to link it all to the Lund children. The old maestro himself also dropped some relevant hints about the cubs that wandered too far from their mother bear and other such herdisms. When the three of them got together, it was all they could talk about. This, or one other topic, which was fed to the boys by the volatile media interest. If not Hurd or the recently released sex offender registry, then the letter that was sent to Carl and Anne-Margaret Lund 2 years after the girl's disappearance, the details of the handwriting analysis thereof, or, for example, the clairvoyant who claimed the girls' bodies were buried under the foundations of the Ringhalle ice hockey stadium. As the articles became rarer, the meetings became so hopeless that each of the boys tried to avoid them in his own way. Jesper secretly went to surf training and played sports. In year 10, Kahn was held back for the first time and then dropped out of school. At the beginning of year 11, Therese went back to Grad. It was only 15 years later that the press finally lost interest in the Lund girls. The investigation had already ended a long time ago. The leading inspectors had all retired. There was no reason to get together anymore. So they retreated to their personal lives. Jesper found himself an underage lingerie model and pretended not to know Kahn when he saw him wearing a light blue cravat at a restaurant table. Therese went alone to Charlottesville every year. He didn't call the others. And Kahn plunged into the bluish-gray world of disappearances once and for all, sitting and clicking on the lights of an airship that went missing a century and a half ago in his mother's basement. Often.
You yourself get used to this pointless fucking idea.
The end of the world. At the entrance to the city, the dark arches at the flag stops rise. The crossing gates are going up. The vests of the customs official and the stripes on the barriers glow lemon yellow. The motor carriage takes off, and everything moves evenly, smoothly. In the leather seat-scented din of radio airwaves, there is talk of a nuclear weapon that was dropped on Revachol 3 hours ago. Khan is warm. The female broadcaster's voice is even and beautiful. Rows of streetlights rise above the crowd, wreathed in cold halos, and slide under the dark blue morning sky. He drifts along with them, in his hometown, which he will leave behind tomorrow night. There's still one thing left to be done. The lanterns dim. Khan watches, and the ghosts of the buildings come out of the white sky with the madrugada. The bedroom smells like lilies. Outside the window of the country house, everything is tinted blue, and the bony fingers of chestnut tree branches sway gently. She wakes up early in the morning and leaves her husband in bed, asleep beneath his sleep mask. The woman is 52 years old. Her face has fine features, and the smile line around her eyes have sunk into crow's feet. Her dark green eyes are impassive beneath her lids. She goes downstairs, past the wooden handrail, in her dressing gown, and makes herself a coffee. The lights are off throughout the cool rooms of the wooden house, and in its spacious kitchen, she likes these blue hours when the house is quiet, when she can hear the field mice scratching under the floorboards. A delicate hand with sharp fingers pushes down the piston of the coffee press. Even the smell of mold that rises from the floorboards has grown on her over time, although she was so petrified by it at first, 17 years ago, when she moved out here. And the silence. Everything is so quiet in the countryside, but over time, even that absence has become a kind of blessing. She goes across the living room, over the cold floorboards. In the dim light, the furniture shines all around her, the elegance of the 50s, paint peeling off the wood. At the door, she pulls her husband's coat over her shoulders and steps into his shoes. Just like that, with her gray hair put up in one simple motion, she steps out onto the porch. The autumn cold makes the coffee cup in her hands emanate thick steam. She stops for a moment, breathes, and then takes a seat on the wooden garden furniture of her choice. Then, leg over knee, Anne Margaret Lund smokes her first cigarette of the day. She watches the light, the sun rising behind the morning mist. In the well-kept garden in front of her, details emerge from the fog. The glass of the greenhouse shines. The grass needs raking. This will be her first chore of the day. She puts out the smoke in an upside-down flower pot serving as an ashtray, and goes back inside. Children of beautiful parents are beautiful. Children of ugly parents are ugly. Aunt Margaret moisturizes her still beautiful body in the downstairs shower. It wasn't always like this. At first, she was as stick-thin as a scarecrow. She was still a little girl then, climbing over planks and up trees with the boys. Then the woman's hormones kicked in and wove a new, alien body around her. An object of admiration made up of fatty tissues and curves. In time, she learned to master its subtleties, graduated from university, taught, fell in love, brought 3 daughters into the world. 3 years in a row, one every year. They were left behind from her, like pearls from a necklace, and her body restored itself, young as she was. She made her friends jealous, how she slept in her husband's arms without shame. But later, when she joined her political party, another one came, the youngest one. Her husband loved her, and so he wasn't horrified when the last one permanently disfigured her. Though the earth's force of gravity prevailed in its own realm, her mind rose high, in the ministry, in her career. But now Anne Margaret Lund stands in front of the mirror, and although her skin has lost its elasticity and some of its radiant color, her hips are narrow again, and her thighs are slim. Everything has contracted again, but this time she feels a faintness about her body instead of relief. It doesn't matter that the feeling of absence, silence, peace, and the smell of mold in her new shelter had entered her, secretly made her its own. She is a void. But when she looks at herself, Anne Margaret still gets scared. As if all of that being a woman had somehow never happened. She tries not to think about it too hard. She dries herself quickly, covers herself in beige day clothes, and leaves. The woman rakes dry leaves in the garden. Back then, when she went to the school at the end of the first semester, the boys had secretly watched. It was the first semester without them, and Anne Margaret went to empty her daughter's closets. A crowd of respect surrounded her. The children moved away. Only Therese, Jesper, and little Inayat watched from around the corner as the woman put her daughter's trinkets from the last year into cardboard boxes. She rolled up a poster of a pop star, and gold stars dropped from between her fingers. None of the boys told each other why they came there to spy. But secretly, they wanted to get pats from her, go home with her, look at the girls' rooms, and then make plans to find them. It was a childish longing. They wanted to be important to what was happening. If anyone had the power to bless them with that role, it was the girl's beautiful mother. That didn't happen. But later, they all came anyway, separately, although they kept it a secret from each other. They found out the location of her countryside home and awkwardly expressed their sympathy to the woman. They also exchanged news in relation to the investigation, and finally, at last, Anne Margaret remembered all of their names. Although the last time this happened was 8 years ago. Later, when Therese and Con confessed, Jesper still lied that he hadn't done such a thing.
Pretty sad stuff.
Anne Margaret steps out from between the bare gooseberry bushes, hangs her gardening gloves on a nail in the shed, and sends her husband to work. Carl Lund still toils like a passionate industrial magnate, although political instability and the resulting international economic crisis are destroying his venture. It doesn't matter that he actually has enough money to go anywhere, even to Stella Marie, to retire. The chauffeur comes to pick him up at 10:30, and his luxury car is wrapped in the gray fog of the village road. Anne Margaret watches him leave from the garden, as the crimson of the taillights fades into the distance. Besides her husband and her morning ritual of fear, all signs that she had once had 4 blonde, green-eyed daughters fade away. One had dark blonde hair, and another had rainbow-colored eyes. But when she puts on the music to play softly and moves her shoulders to the beat, she can no longer remember whose features those were. Then, when the guilt subsides and daylight comes in between the white lace curtains, Anne Margaret Lund feels light. She floats, as if her whole life had not been lived, and all the impressions, the small dents that a person leaves in the world, would be hammered out in the rhythm of the music. She moves modestly in the shadow of her family tree, from which all the leaves had fallen. She doesn't know anymore that the way she puts her upper lip on top of her lower lip, forgetting herself and humming along to the music, is exactly how Charlotte did it. She sweeps the floors, straightens the tablecloths, and taps the rows of books on the shelves to make them even. She doesn't listen to the radio. It means nothing to her. As far as Anne Margaret is concerned, the world ended a long time ago, and left her here to do housework. She sits at the kitchen table with her hands folded and watches how the household shines. It's 4:30. The rooms are quiet and clean. Sometimes She naps like a cat in the afternoon, her gray head bobbing above the table. It happened overnight, like it did for Dolores Day. 20 years ago, on the morning of the 29th of August, she woke up and her hair had turned gray. She hears music in her sleep. Light from the kitchen window floods her hair, and, for a moment, it looks golden again. The door knocker raps on the door like a woodpecker. Maybe Carl left something, or he's coming home early. But why knock? It just seems unlikely that anyone would visit her. Almost no one comes here anymore, and she likes it that way. Anne Margaret Lund adjusts her clothes, straightens her over-the-knee skirt that got wrinkled when she was sitting, readies her mouth for a smile, and opens the door.
"Hello, madam."
3 men stand there with awkward smiles on their faces. One is wearing terribly expensive clothing and smells of 500 real aftershave, unable to hide the fever that's making his forehead glow red. The second one is standing next to him in a dark orange windbreaker, with a scarf in the tricolor of Il Marat around his neck, and the third, tall and lanky, hurries to extinguish a smoke. Although recognition is slow to come, she invites the men in and watches them stand there in their outside clothing. It's only when she sees the boyish timidity with which they shuffle from foot to foot and scuff the floor with the toes of their shoes that she remembers who they are. This reminds her of the behavior of a young admirer.
"We have news," says Inayat Khan. "I know, yes, you shouldn't get your hopes up, but this is good news, madam."
When the lady leads them into the kitchen, her heart feels as heavy as lead again, and her hair is silver in the dim half-light. Coffee? Tea? 5 hours ago, Jesper sits at the cafe Kino. In the midday light, between the glass walls and cubicle furniture, he feels a little less projected than usual. His head is thick, and his eyelids are strangely heavy. He wipes a trickling bead of sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief embroidered with his initials. The interior designer looks more miserable than usual. He pulls his sweater off over his head. In his dress shirt, he starts to cool down again. The late autumn cold seeps through the floor-to-ceiling windows. A crowd passes by outside. He orders himself 1 green tea with lemon and honey.
"I must have got a little cold,"
he says across the table to a man a few years younger than him. He does remember him. It's little Ole. He was 4 grades below them. Jesper mainly remembers Ole's brilliant talent for forgery. The upperclassman had used his golden hand for all kinds of signatures, and the boy made good money that way. All these report cards full of failing grades and planners full of misdemeanor notes that needed signatures. Now little Ole had grown a big brown mustache, and Jesper draws his own conclusions from this. Ole is a copywriter, and mustaches are in fashion again, in certain circles. In circles where the innocence of nihilism, Saint Miro, is seen as some kind of exotic poet. At least, that was the case up until 2 days ago, when the country from which both Saint Miro and the old-fashioned mustache craze originated hadn't yet used an atomic weapon on another country.
"That their nihilism trend seems to be kicking the bucket now,"
Jesper mentions passingly. Ole agrees enthusiastically. "Yeah, I should get rid of the mustache, I know. The news was a bombshell to all of us. Pardon the expression. Do we, perhaps—"
Yeah, it's terrible,"
Jesper interrupts him mid-sentence.
"A total tragedy. Why did you call me, Ole?"
"I read this advertisement and thought about it for a long time. Only when the bomb went off did I, finally feel sorry about it, I guess."
"What the hell, Ole? What's going on? What did you feel sorry for?"
The mustachioed copywriter starts. Jesper has suddenly turned beet red in front of him. He leans closer across the table. As Ole tries to hide his eyes, his focus is pulled away from Jesper by the albino tiger in the far corner of the cafe. Although the copywriter often comes here to make acquaintances, he's never liked that creepy stuffed animal. Wait a sec. I didn't snuff them out. I just wrote those letters.
Why in God's name would you do something like that?
I don't know, stammers Ole. I was young then. I really don't know why I did it. Everyone at school was talking about them after it happened. Maybe I just wanted to see what would happen. Like, will they figure out it wasn't really Malin? This guy, Ziggy, brought me Malin's old notebook and asked if I could handle the handwriting. It seemed pretty easy, and, well, I thought I'd give it a try.
And you sent them, or did someone else?
Ziggy sent them. I just wrote them. You know, I'm really sorry about that. You have to understand that I was young then, and, well, I considered myself a little bit of a nihilist, too.
And you have nothing else to say about it? You don't know anything about them? Even if, for example, I went to the police with this story, you wouldn't have any more to say?
Unfortunately, yes. It seems that Ole is sorry from the bottom of his heart. He smooths his mustache nervously, and Jesper looks out the window to Östermalm, his eyes glassy from fever. A crowd in dark clothes pushes past the window. His mouth reddens. He pulls his sweater back on and grabs his coat from the rack.
Idiot,
he says, and leaves. Ole stays behind to pay the bill. When the check is brought to the table, the albino tiger is still glaring at him viciously. And that's good news? Anne Margaret asks, and ashes her cigarette 6 hours later. Puffs of smoke rise from her and Therese Maciek's mouths. A uniform, thin gray light seeps from the sky. She sits with the 3 men around the wooden table on the porch outside, and a gust of wind blows dark brown leaves across the floor. Jesper, having finished his story, feels wrong-footed. But then Con jumps in.
No, that's not all. Look at it this way. What's remarkable about this is that 20 years later, with the way the world is now, new things are still coming to light. Meaning, there's still time. And I have a feeling that that's why everything is coming out right now. Because there's something in the air.
The former minister sits with her back stick straight, her leg folded femininely over her knee. She is expectantly silent, and it cools Con's enthusiasm. The man takes a sip of what's left of his coffee, or rather, he pretends to take one. There's nothing there but a thick layer of sugar. Con starts up again.
Now, I don't know what you might be thinking about it, or how seriously you're taking it.
For example, I don't take it very seriously,
Jesper interjects.
Anyway, Con continues, a little annoyed, I'll tell you right away that I do. Take it seriously, I mean. We just came from Lemon K's, by the way, from a meeting with a private consultant. He's quite well known, although he keeps a low profile.
Therese gives him a warning look, and Con changes tack.
Ulf is his name. Have you heard of him?
I don't think I have.
You go to him with things that you can't get information about anywhere else, with things that are stuck. He's been involved in the investigation of at least 12 deaths, and he's always helped somehow. In general, the police don't brag about it, but Therese can assure you that it's true.
Former Agent Maciek nods his head. He feels the woman's eyes on him, and tries to behave as one would behave at work with one of their own, tries to be frigidly respectful, reliable, but he doesn't feel like he manages it. We love the girls. We love them more. He's so embarrassed about his earlier thoughts. At first, he tries not to look back at her, but then he lifts his eyes. For a moment, his hazel eyes and Anne Margaret's tired emeralds.
His methods are such that they're not noted later in the official investigation, Therese begins. It's a silent agreement with the prosecutor's office.
Mentioning it would give the defense too much to latch onto.
This is some kind of para-detective, I've come to understand? Under the pressure of the media, the police and the city government had finally dug up the entire west wing of Ringhala. The clairvoyant had rolled his eyes and kept pointing, but the only thing that came out of the concrete foundation was more concrete foundation. And that was just one specific case. There have been more than enough necromancers. The woman allows herself some bitterness. Therese signals Khan to wait.
When I do my job, I don't do it for the rule of law. I'm doing it for the sake of the victim.
When he talks like this, he forgets himself. His confidence returns. He's a collaboration police agent again, not the leaf in the wind that he's made himself out to be.
So I don't care how or from where we get the information, as long as it gets results. It's true, I haven't been to this particular private advisor. Unfortunately, his field only deals with cases where the victim is already dead. But he's got an undeniable talent for this. For example, this same wolf has himself also been a suspect in 8 different cases that he's advised on. If that sounds authoritative to you, it honestly does to me. They were totally unrelated incidents, and no evidence has ever been found against him. Do you understand?
She pulls out a smoke thoughtfully, and when Therese offers her a light, Khan takes the opportunity. He laughs across the table and blurts out,
"He doesn't know anything about the girls."
"And what does that mean?" The woman is at a loss. Khan looks at her with a broad smile.
"He can't give any information about them. Nothing. A completely blank page. He doesn't know where they are. He doesn't know anything about their past. No secrets. But that's the point. He knows nothing because they aren't dead."
The woman is secretly horrified. Her ladylike posture remains unchanged. Therese notices something suspicious in her reaction. But out of great respect, he can't say what it is yet. "And that same consultant says that?" Anne Margaret keeps looking at them questioningly. Khan places a stack of paper in front of her.
"These are my notes about the girls. This is the summary I gave him. His notes are there at the end. You'll see that those are the exact word he uses. Not dead."
Anne Margaret flips through the pages. The world-shaking calamity slips by again under her gaze. Photocopies and dates, a chronology of events.
"In such a case, it is customary to give a proofing envelope as well," Khan continues. "If it's not possible to verify the correctness of the first, currently the girls, we would have nothing to prove with it by itself. Then the correctness of the second proves it. And guess who else isn't dead yet?"
Khan pulls out his second envelope from his jacket pocket and places it on the table. It wasn't until Therese finally saw this that he began to seriously consider Khan's strange experiment. Sigismund Berg is written on it. Jesper doesn't know anything about it yet. He watches, neck craned out of curiosity.
"I gave him Ziggy."
Khan is in the zone. He forgets himself and talks directly to Jesper. The arcs of connection he draws in the air become more and more fantastical. How one paraspecialist's statement proves the other. A yarn ball of dotted lines. The label proudly stating, "Axiom." And then these letters, too. How they absolutely have to find out what became of that shaggy-headed kid in the leather jacket. The arrow jumps. What else can come out of it? Only Therese, who's already heard all of this, is still observing Anne Margaret's reaction. There is none. The woman just stares at one page in the girl's folder. It's slowly getting dark outside and cold. She's raised her coat collar, and when Therese catches her eye, she doesn't answer. She hasn't really been reading for a long time. She just stares, the familiar dark green of her eyes standing still. What is that feeling, just barely slipping along deep down in there? Therese thinks he knows. How the corners of her eyes are slightly lowered, this unrecognizability. She is recalling. But what? The evening is drawing in a blue twilight, and Con, in the middle, burns like a bulb. All around, in the quiet rural village, the air is crystal cold. The man leans back into his folding chair and wipes his glasses with a triumphant expression. Beside him, Therese decides on the easiest solution and reaches out to grab the edge of the folder. The woman is still holding it. She hasn't managed to turn the page yet.
May I?
Yes, of course. And Margaret nods. It's as if she wakes up. It's all very confusing, I have to admit. And while Con explains how the children's mother should now contact the police about it, Therese looks at the 4 photos of the Lund's children from the folder. Con has lined them up by age, like pearls in a necklace. Anne Margaret closes the garden gate after the visitors leave. She waves gently through the back window. The taxi rolls down the gravel road. It's no longer Kenni at the wheel. Kenni has long since gone to his Kenni world to do Kenni things. They are 40 kilometers from Vasa, and they can't get away from that white country house in the midst of the chestnut trees fast enough. They're all secretly relieved to leave. It's also kind of embarrassing. No one can say a thing as the gravel crunches under the wheels. In the end, Con still tries.
She, didn't seem too happy, or something.
Jesper snorts.
You just have to have this moronic idea. Well, in your view, what do you think we should have done? Not talk to her at all? Let her figure it out herself, what was up with those letters, for example? Yes. They're not dead, Miss Lund. Your children are still alive. Alive, children. You just couldn't let her be, could you? The mystery had to be solved.
For a little while longer, they sit quietly and stare out the window. Village roads pass. The car rattles, and Therese asks the driver if he can smoke inside. He lights up. The match flashes in the dim interior, and the cigarette paper crackles in its flame. The bitter Astra smoke circulates around the cabin. After so long in Kenni's machine, it feels kind of treacherous to be sitting here. Con's conscience begins to sting.
Maybe we really shouldn't have done it. What if she's resigned herself to it, and we annoyed her like that for no reason? What if nothing will come of this either?
You think?
Jesper resorts snidely.
Maybe it was our duty to rush into a stranger's home and tell her about her children.
He's lost in thought for a moment before starting up again.
I honestly don't believe it, Con. That she's resigned or whatever. Maybe she's trying to move on with her life. Of course, I'm not a parent.
Therese pulls an ashtray from the door. He smokes in silence. They avoid the network of motorways and the traffic jams there, driving alongside the village roads between fields and groves in the evening. Halfway through their drive, he's on his 6th smoke, and the cabin is slowly getting stuffy. The ex-agent politely rolls down the window, and fresh air rushes in, along with a few snowflakes. They float outside on the edge of the ditch. Bare bushes rush past them, and snow is starting to fall in the distance, over the fields.
She hasn't resigned herself to it, says Therese. She's forgotten. I didn't see any pictures of them in that whole house. She also looked at them in this folder of yours, as if she was trying to remember who they were.
Con shivers from the cold. Nobody says anything. That means they agree. There's another long pause before Jesper shivers too. This is exactly how they let each other know how it makes them feel. They rarely talk among themselves about what they really think, about all of that vanishing. It's like this because they talk too much at first. So much that talking no longer helped. Everything has been said, and they have nothing left to comfort each other with. That's why it's so surprising when Jesper says,
"Sometimes it seems to me that the whole world has forgotten them."
"That's how it is," says Therese. And Con says,
"Let's go find this cocksucker's house."
"Let's get it done today already," says Therese. Hearing this, Con asks, "Where do we want to go?"
"To Grod,"
Therese replies. And they both look in Jesper's direction.
"Davai,"
says Jesper. With the darkness comes a blizzard. They drive through the streets of Salem, and the city around them closes down in the storm, for the first time this year. The sweet, cold smell of snow wafts into the cabin with Con when he comes back with a large suitcase in each hand. He leaves tracks behind him in the snow. His old mother stands at the door with her apron on and calls out about something, but no one hears what it is. The machine is already speeding down the road, and snow swirls outside in the street tunnel. It snows the whole time they're waiting for Jesper in front of his house. 2 hours. It already seems like they might not reach their night train. The wind blows white ribbons from the spruce trees. The black motor carriage is buried under snow. Finally, Jesper comes out with a white suitcase in his hand.
"How did it go?"
"Well, let's just say it didn't go too well,"
he replies. "Let's ride."
They drive. Fast. They ask the taxi driver to drive even faster, but that would be dangerous. The blizzard paints streaks in the headlights. Its chaos scatters everywhere, on the roads, in the orange halos of the streetlights. Therese throws money to the driver and gets out first, glancing at his watch. He runs across the snowy square. The sound of the taxi doors slamming shut left behind him. He doesn't care that Jesper left his things behind at his place. Jesper's only regret is that he couldn't find the scrunchie when he left the lingerie model. He really could have been harsher. He feels bad about that, too. He runs with his suitcase in his hand, snow sticking in his eyes, and all kinds of backhanded witticisms come to mind.
"This fashion stuff, with his fashion stuff, you see, it's not good anymore. This model stuff, it has no future. You're taking my house and you're going to live in Vasa now. It's not safe to travel. Do you get it? It's time to get a real job."
It's nighttime, but even so, there's a crowd in front of the elevators. They curse as Therese flashes his false documents.
"Collaboration police, move!"
He is no longer Somerset Ulrich. Now he's Cosmo Konchalovsky. Cosmo is not a missing agent. He's Therese's own brainchild. To cover the tracks, no one can trace him. Only when a filled-to-the-brim elevator car lifts them above the city do the three boys sit down on top of their suitcases and catch their breath. The city is buried in snow. There below, in the boughs of the motorways, its light seeps into saturnine green, into the gold of the streetlights, into orange, until the darkness of the floating train station engulfs them. The elevator doors open, and they run under the high steel arches of the station building. There, too, a nocturnal crowd awaits them. It's crowded everywhere, in the hall, in front of the ticket offices, even though the boards show that there are no free seats, and the kitten-like voice from the box speakers confirms it. Even the flight the day after tomorrow to Samara, SRV, is fully sold out. Exactly. A degenerate bureaucratic workers' republic is where you want to be right now. Not to mention that at this very moment in Grod, the honeycomb irrigation network is disappearing, after which a wave crest will rise menacingly over Yekokata. Where are you running to? Stay home. Join the army. They squeeze themselves out onto the platform. It's snowing high up under the night sky as well, and when the car attendant cuts them off in front of the 5-fold running boards of the magnet train, Therese does something he never does. Cosmo Konchalovsky's authoritative flashes no longer have any effect on the car attendant, numbed by the bustle of the crowd. The kitten-voiced girl announces the imminent departure of the flight and asks everyone to step behind the yellow line. They can already hear the hydraulics of the train doors hissing. Therese puts his hand under his jacket and pulls out a pistolet. The leather pocket of the holster hangs under his arm. Mahogany handle firmly in his palm, he passes through the doors into the luxurious gloom of the train. The barrel of the gun gleams, and the car attendant retreats before the service weapon. Behind Therese, Con and Jesper also slip in. The doors slam shut behind them. The magnets hum. One of Con's suitcases is left behind on the platform. Therese puts the pistolet back in its holster and apologizes to the horrified attendant. They're not used to this kind of thing here in Katla. The ex-agent thanks the woman for her cooperation. He's back to using diplomacy. Outside on the platform, giant buffers are being pulled off the train. The umbilical cord is cut, and thus, freed from the connecting bridges, the entire weight of the train, with its 5-fold carat slats, sinks onto the magnets. They howl at full power below the train cars, and then the flight begins. The magnetic support splits the North Sea under it in two. It's quiet inside, the generators humming as the train whizzes by 50 meters above the water. The three of them stand together, laughing. Therese extinguishes his smoke in a bronze ashtray, and they turn their back on the observation windows. Ahead, the Pale waits, and past it begins a big world. Somewhere out there, in its cities, streets, or steppe expanses, is Sigismund Berg, the only person in this world who knows what happened to the Lund children. Through the windows, all that's left of the city behind them is the light pollution, a golden glow in the distant darkness of the snowstorm. Chapter 15. Mold. Dierik Trentmøller lies in a catatonic state. The retirement home around him is silent. He no longer remembers the name of anything, and any connections are meaningless to him. Everything is forgettable. He looks at the whole world with a blissful question mark, like a child. After 2 months, the nurse comes to his room and, stopping at the door, breathes a sigh of relief. They disconnect the cannula from the old man's wrist. A lace of tree branches lies along the walls of the yard, and outside in the suburbs, a motor carriage whizzes by. Its wheels crunch on the snow. Inside, in the warm cabin, sits the well-known minimalist and deaf music critic Are Akerlund, Jesper's colleague from his office days. His prospects don't look bright. It's almost impossible to plagiarize music record reviews from the West if no new records are being made. But Are Akerlund does a lot of cocaine, and that, as we know, makes one very intelligent. The social climate is different now, but consumption as such remains. This means that there's still room for advertising. Are Akerlund lays the foundation for the later world-famous Ideas Laboratory in Vasa, an advertising agency that produces ideas for advertisements instead of actual advertising. Someone else will actually create the ads later. In a few months, a masterpiece of apocalyptic advertising will be born from the Ideas Laboratory. The transport giant ZAM's inter-esalary campaign is also getting started in the Nordic countries with the slogan, "Escape, it's not too late." At that time, or a little later, around the winter solstice, Konrad Gissel's newly released documentary goes unnoticed by the general public. The winter will be long and dark, and the panicked masses demand lighter entertainment. It doesn't matter that the director is an 8-time Oscar Zorn nominee. But then the ecumenical aggressor of Mesk brings their fleet out of the pale, this maneuver sending them gliding across the far north of the Boreal Plateau. Beneath the northern lights, black smoke rises into the sky from the Holodnaya Zemlya, oblast of Grad. Arda, Vasa, and Suruma then join Grad, which had declared war on Mesk 2 months earlier. And with that, Katla, on this patch of land, on the edge of the world, is dragged into the great centrifuge. The viewer numbers of the film, Vidkun heard, start to improve. Much to his dismay, however, Konrad Giselle sees the kind of audience in cinema halls that he had feared the most when he started his controversial project. Bad times give discontent a national color. There sit the military youth, mesmerized, together with senile Nazi grandpas. None of them really understand the humanist Giselle's subtle treatment of symbols, his irony, his sense of the absurd. The dim-witted militarists sincerely admire Herd's black shirt posturing without the slightest irony. They're especially impressed by how the great figure finally collapses under his own superhuman maxims. They find it poetic how he blurts out unrelated talk in his final interviews. The chilling shots of a vegetating Herd in his cell move them to tears. In the end, it turns out that even he, with his mind of a mythical hero, couldn't survive on those ancient truths. They were too honest, too genuine. Warrior as he was, Herd persisted until the end, without sinking back down into the influence of a diluted central space. Therein lay his triumph, his hubris, and his downfall. The truth is simply too mighty. This is just one of several end-of-the-world absurdities, but Sven von Fersen, inspired by this, decides that it's time to come out of the closet. Over time, Sven phased out his witty management articles and replaced them with statements of the support of the government and the armed forces. When Grad and its northern allies find themselves on the losing side of a world war, the only real opposition is organized in Il Marat. Sven von Fersen doesn't want a helping hand from the camel shits. Before you even notice, they'll stab you in the back with a scimitar. But in the end, fascism will remain on the fringes of society, where it has always been, between cryptozoology and psionics. The vast majority of people are not like Sven von Fersen. The Nordic sense of style is too clearly developed in them, and extremes can't find a voice. The editor's delicate hand erases racially insensitive vocabulary from such writings. He doesn't simply leave them unpublished. That would be against freedom of expression. In this way, the plot of Land in the Pale enters the phase of geopolitical apocalypse alongside the rest of the world. But rather than collapsing, it drifts apart, still a social democracy. They still generously give out paychecks to those who just loiter around. Cruiser ships are sunk by shell fire in the North Sea, but the state still offers the unemployed artist retraining opportunities in his own field. Grad loses the Boreal Plateau in the north. Jelinka burns in the 3-month winter night, and no one survives. But the unemployed Per Jonas is still talking about the book he's writing. Grad abandons the insignificant war theater of Katla in order to gather forces for the defense of its home Isola. The road to Arda is now open to the aggressor, and the front moves closer day by day. But there's still no news of Per Jonas's book. In this manner, despite the objections of the extremists, the nation of Vasa goes behind the curtains of history, with its 3-year paid paternity leave and impeccably functioning public transport. Nothing seems to stop future ecologically oriented projects there either. In the very last months, when the Pale is creeping across the ocean towards Vasa. Lobby groups against light pollution see their grand dream come true. Industrial and commercial buildings turn off artificial lighting at the end of the working day, and streetlights are shielded with special filters. As the first and last big city in the history of the world, Vasa completely eliminates light pollution. This isn't just a measure against bomb raids, it also saves birds who might otherwise get lost in the city's maze of lights, and harbor seals whose mating rhythms are disrupted when the day is too long. You may laugh at this, but in the evening, when the big world in the distance swells into a bloody maelstrom, families come out into the street in Vasa and are insignificant together. Only distant explosions disturb the deep peace of the winter night, its flawless starry sky. Everyone watches, heads tilted back. Khan's old mother also watches in Salem. Her eyes are painted beautifully in Ilmaran colors. A golden headscarf covers her hair. It's cold, and the woman's breath steams in the streets of the wooden city. Aliya Khan had seen her son for the last time that night, 4 years ago. It wasn't much later, no more than a month, that he'd called and said goodbye to his mother. Families mill around, among them men of service age. Inayat had said that he wouldn't return, but they come from the Northern Front all the time. Soldiers. Even the war has somehow been neglected. All of this is a kind of degeneration, a giving in. But even in this is the motto, precisely associated with moralism, of movement whose daughter cell is social democracy, reflected. It reads like this: For a moment, it seemed as if there was hope for humanity. Then, when the stars bend under the destruction falling from above, many can no longer take the phrase, the end of the world, entirely seriously. The panic has cooled. In the strange indifference of the evacuation, whose families stay behind in Vasa. There they play board games, in their houses, in their spacious apartments. They love vitamin-rich food, and when the Pale is only a few days away, it's always signaled by the same beautiful event. Fruits go moldy. It grows vigorously on them. Children listen to oranges crackling on the table. Spores sprout from the pulp. Apples are hairy with it. If you try to touch them, they crack open. No one knows why it's like that, but few can muster the energy to be afraid of that time, as that's why I say it's beautiful. Khan's mother is one of those who decide to stay behind in Vasa when the Pale comes. Many others flee. They head up to Arda, closer to the front and away from the Pale. There, in the winter's orbit, Anita Lundqvist and her delicate hands go to the munitions factory to polish cartridges. In these last few years, especially after the evacuation, the lingerie model seems extremely strong. All the frivolity and thirst for life that made the girl an exemplary human being in the functioning world translate into something completely different at the end of the world. These are leadership qualities, and Anita Lundqvist is the queen of the refugee camp. When R.A. Åkerlund meets her there, he doesn't even recognize her. Who is this Valkyrie? But then Anita comes to him, greets him by name, and reveals medication in her apron to alleviate Åkerlund's withdrawal symptoms. The famous minimalist and deaf music critic is grateful. He tells the girl about an international drug business that no longer operates, and how the black currency, HR, the interinsulary real, has been devalued, and the world economy has collapsed. Finally, Åkerlund tells her about the non-world, everything he experienced on the way to the refugee camp. He came to Arda on foot. left behind in the evacuation. He had pushed for 2 months across the frozen fjords. He came through abandoned ghost towns, alone with the pail on his heels. He crawled across the permafrost, where the wreckage of downed airships was buried in the snowdrifts around him. Akerlund also tells her about the horse that dragged his sleigh, and that he eventually ate. Anita reciprocates and tells him about Jesper. She says only good things. The factory where Anita works is a strategic resource. Although it's hidden deep in the fjords, the recently launched MESC reconnaissance satellite Mosaic finds it there. The ecumenical aggressor wipes out the munitions factory with a hail of bombs, and the lingerie model is lost in the whirlwind of war. This is 6 years after the night of the blizzard, when Khan, Jesper, and Therese drove away. Below, above the southern coast of Katla, the enemy of matter, the great transition, buries the former Isola. Vasa and Charlottesville Beach were once there. Now no one leaves there, even though those who were left behind, friends and family members, are awaited in the camps. Anne Margaret Lund also sits there, somewhere in her kitchen. In the middle of the pale, her rooms are quiet and clean. The former teacher wears a beige jacket and an above-the-knee skirt, and watches the molding apricots. It would probably be too much to say that she hasn't called the police in the meantime. Anne Margaret lets go of her husband's hand. Like everyone else, she can't do anything in this extended stay, where one's sense of the present slowly drifts away. But whereas the others dissolve into their memories, she simply disappears. It's as if her life had never happened. The past is not awaiting her return. She just wanders around the rooms, adjusts her grandmother's lace doily and bedspreads, arranges the curtains on the rails, and thus, tastefully, she refuses to indulge in those ecstasies which visit the human spirit when the world is disintegrating. Nothing leaves her hands, and nothing returns. When Katla finally sinks into the pale, Anne Margaret Lund turns, without the slightest pleasure, into a protein mass.